Mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check. All right. Mm.
Or months.
What's up, everybody? Mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check. Let's scoot that back a little more. Mic check, mic check. Mic check, mic check. Perfect, perfect. Mic check, mic check. Mic check, mic check. Perfect. Perfect. What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? Okay, let me take this to the next spot. But I need the chat. What's the chat? Perfect. Perfect. Then we'll go down here. And we got exit out of that. We have this. We have that. What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? Mic check. Mic check. Somebody let me know. Even if you're not gonna hang out, just let me know how it sounds. It should be TikTok should be this mic, and then YouTube should be this mic. Perfect. Thanks. They said we're not showing your stuff to anybody. Why you keep doing it? Perfect. Perfect. What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? Mic check. Check. Let's see. I wanna let me move this that way. Maybe it's a little more. All right, let me see here. So we're going to start with that. Define. We're going to talk about then we're going to do in personam. What's up, everybody? Anybody here? Mic check. Mic check. Roman law, ecclesiastical law, Admiralty, maritime, commerce. Okay. Is this the right TikTok page? It is. They said we're not showing this thing to nobody. This is hilarious. I'm actually gonna put that here. What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? What's up? Mic check, mic check. All right, well, I will stop talking. I will start talking. Whoever is interested is interested. All right, let me get a little sip. Let me get a little sip. Mic is working good on YouTube. All right, let's see. All right, yesterday I talked about commerce. Oh, I gotta start recording. If I am facing felonies, why do I not get a grand jury indictment? Well, it depends on the case, but if they call it a crime, you're supposed to have an injured party, and then the injured party would start the case typically. If the injured party didn't start the case, then you should have an grand jury indictment. That needs to be there. We go. But it depends on the case, and I'm not an attorney, so uh, it would depend on the case. What does your state's constitution say? That's the answer. There we go. So, what does your state constitution say? What are your state bill of rights? And it depends on the case. Every case is different. All right. All right. Let's talk about what we talked about yesterday. Yesterday we talked about commerce and the Constitution. Um, Yesterday we talked about Noah, Ham, and Canaan. All right. Noah is the father of Ham. Ham lived a life of perverseness. As a result of his perversion, Noah pronounced the curse on Canaan. Canaan, as a result of being under a curse, created a nation of curses or people who are cursed. And so these people are called the Canaanites. The Canaanites became proficient in excelling in creating what we now know to be commercial law, or more appropriately termed, the law merchant. Okay, so the law merchant would be the origin or the rightful definition of commerce and commercial law. All right, commercial law comes from the Canaanites, who and then were so hated they changed their name to the Phoenicians. Okay, and then these Phoenicians continued their merchant practices. Um, so without the title of Phoenician and Canaanite, they would be called the merchants. So the merchants spread their practices of what they call intercourse, negotiation, trade, exchange. All of these rules and practices were developed by these people called the merchants. And as a result, they spread their practices from Egypt, where Egypt flourished in the world of commerce. Then they changed their name to Phoenicians, and then they spread their practices to Babylon. And then now they're just called merchants, or anybody who participates in these practices are just called merchants, and they primarily are influenced from the world of Rome or the Roman Empire. All right. These merchants were developing their practices along the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea, if you go to Google Maps and go to the Mediterranean Sea, well, you have Europe, Asia, and Africa around this around this. And there, these Phoenicians dominated what they call international sea trade. Why? Why was it called international? Because there was three different continents right there. Backwards. Thank you for saying that. I mean, not that you can see it anyway, but yes, you're right. It does help. It does help. Uh, but so along the Mediterranean Sea, you have Europe, Asia, Africa, there's one body of water. They they had contracts, the Venetians had contracts with all different nations. So you can go to Google Maps, look at all the nations. They got, I mean, every nation from Africa and Europe, right? They created contracts with these different nations and developed what they would call maritime sea trade, or what is now known as commerce. All right. How did they do that? They used ships to take things from one, I'll say continent to blanket it, from one continent to the other. As a result, they termed this merchants. All right. This is all developed by the Phoenicians, who were called the Canaanites. They're the same group of people, Phoenicians. Now they just are merchants. Right. So Europe, Asia, Africa, and they practice this thing called merchants. What is a merchant? Mer means sea. What sea? The Mediterranean Sea, where they develop these international relationships. Right? And through there, they use what they call incantations or enchantments to persuade people, to invigorate people into participating in commercial activities. And as a result, there is an entire reality that are surrounded by called commerce. And in the US Constitution, it says that the feds have the power to regulate commerce. And after we got through talking about all the different definitions of merchant and commerce, from the sea to ships to traffic to intercourse to navigation, in the United States Constitution, there's only one type of court that can hear issues of commerce. One of the definitions of from a business law book that I read yesterday said that as the development of commercial law, anytime you would hear a phrase that is related to, they said, the law of agency, sales, insurance, bankruptcy, negotiable instruments, stoppage and transit liens, all of these things are under the subject of commerce or merchant law. So anytime anything is related to any of those subtopics, what subtopics? Bankruptcy, banking, liens, insurance, any type of insurance is under commerce. Any type of principal in agency is under commerce. That is the law of commerce. It is under the definition of commerce. Anything related to traffic, which would be licensing or cargo or being a passenger, all of that is under the definition or the subject matter of commerce. And as I ended the subject yesterday, there's only one type of court that can hear issues of commerce, because Article 1 uses the phrase commerce two times. They say that the power to regulate commerce, and then they said there would be no preference given to the regulation of commerce. And then you get to Article 3, and they talk about the different types of cases that they can hear. They said they got a case about law, they got a case about equity, they got a case about um, treaties and laws under the Constitution and laws of the United States. And then they got this thing called Admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. Then they got laws related to, they got issues and cases related to citizenship and to different land grants. And then you got criminal law in the Constitution. They say, okay, well, these are the type of cases that we can hear. But they don't ever mention the phrase commerce in this list of types of cases that they can hear. Why? Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear issues of admiralty, and that is, or issues of commerce, and that is an admiralty court or an admiralty and maritime court. So tonight, we're going to go over just a brief overview uh, what admiralty is in the United States Constitution. So, yeah, so that's what we talked about yesterday. And today, let's see if I don't butcher it again. And y'all can share this live, by the way. I seen a scammer on the internet talking to 170 people. They don't show my stuff to nobody. So unless you share it, it don't get out. All right. Let's see here. So we're gonna talk about Admiralty. This is just a backdrop for me. If you can read it, great. If you can't, sorry. It's more for me. All right. Let's see where I want to start. So let's go to the Constitution. We'll start there. So the Constitution is broken into three parts primarily. So you got the first part, which is the legislative branch. They write statutes related to federal things, right? And then you have the second one. You have the executive branch, which is related to executing these statutes that Congress would write. So you have the presidency, then you have the military, and then you have some aspect of law enforcement. And then you have the third branch of government, which is the judiciary. And as I stated earlier, judiciary has certain types of cases that they can hear. I'll read that, give a little backdrop. They said judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and then such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. I may do it tomorrow, but I'm going to go over inferior courts so that that is properly understood. Most of the courts that we deal with in America are inferior courts, and we have a right definition of that. So I'll probably go over that tomorrow. Um, if not, I'll go over what money is in the Constitution. So either one of those. But I'll probably do inferior courts tomorrow. So Article 3, Section 1 of the United States Constitution says that judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and then in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So, real quick, who establishes inferior courts? Congress does. All right. Uh, and then they go to Section 2. Section 2 says judicial power shall extend to all cases, whether superior or inferior, to these types of issues. They say law, they say equity, they say arising under this Constitution, arising or laws under the United States, treaties which shall be paid under their authority, or to all cases affecting ambassadors, public ministers, consuls. Then they say to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. Let me go to the definitions of admiralty. I think that'll help um, paint the picture better. All right. So, what is admiralty? That's always the question. Whenever you hear a question of law, whenever you hear anything related to government or law, the the right question or the first thing that should be done is for you to define the term. All right, say define the term. Any scammer or anybody on the internet supposedly talking about a topic that is related to government or law or in the media or in your face, ask them to define the term. Our job is not to be believing random people on the internet. Our job is to rightly define the words that we are using. So you have permission to scrutinize, to question everything. Define the term. Because people use words every day. We have no clue what they mean. All right. Um, so what is first of all, what is an admiral? Actually, I have that. Maybe I'll go to uh, yeah. An admiral. Okay, here we go. So this is a dictionary from the 1800s, the early 1800s. They say an admiral is an officer. In some countries, it is the commander in chief of the naval forces. They say this office does not exist in the United States. All right. So this is very important. All right. So what is an admiral? An admiral is an officer in some countries, and it is the chief or the commander in chief of naval forces. All right. So that is, they say this office called an admiral does not exist in the United States. All right. Now, what is admiralty? And I keep hearing people on the internet say admiralty. That's not a word. That's not a, there's no extra I in there. There's one I. Admiral, admiralty is the name of a jurisdiction. This is the first thing they tell you about admiralty. They say admiralty, as it relates to the United States Constitution, is a jurisdiction. I mean, it says it's a jurisdiction. It says to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, right? So they say admiralty is the name of a jurisdiction. Okay, well, what is a jurisdiction? Because we don't rightly define that either. On TV, they want you to think jurisdiction is what a police officer has. Mm-mm, that ain't got nothing to do with him. That word never applied to somebody with a badge and handcuffs. If you go from South Carolina to North Carolina, the state trooper don't have jurisdiction. Well, that's not what the word means. What is jurisdiction? Jurisdiction is the power of the courts to hear and decide a case. People say all the time, "Oh, brother, they don't have jurisdiction, so I'm just going to challenge jurisdiction." Yeah, but we don't know what jurisdiction is. Jurisdiction is the power of the courts to hear and decide a case. So the question really is, well, how do they create cases? But that's another topic for another day. Because people say, "Oh, brother, I'm just going, oh, when I get in court, get in court." Well, how did you end up in court? Because if they didn't have jurisdiction, you wouldn't have been up in there. Uh-oh, I don't want to get in trouble too early. So the question is, how do they create cases? Not if they had jurisdiction. If they didn't have jurisdiction, you wouldn't be in there. All right. Admiralty is the name of a jurisdiction which takes cognizance of lawsuits or actions in law arising in consequence to acts done upon or related to the sea. So they say these things can be done on the sea, right? You Google admiralty, they say it's the law of the sea. But they said yeah, it can be done on the sea, or it can be done relating to the sea. So you may not ever have been on the sea, but you may be subject to admiralty jurisdiction because of your participation in acts related to the sea. Does that make sense? And then they give you a what they call a semicolon. The semicolon says, or in other words, this admiralty thing takes cognizance of all transactions and proceedings relative to commerce and navigation. Relative to what? To commerce. Somebody say commerce in the comment section. Relative to commerce. Remember, I just went over it. There's only one type of court that can hear commercial cases. That's an admiralty court. Okay, so we know if we participate in commerce, there's only one type of court that can hear issues related to commerce, either in making a claim or violating something related to it. All right, there's only one type of court in all the world. If you go to another country and you participate in commerce, okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear that, right? Commerce is not a new term. Admiralty is not a new term, right? So we got to go back to the past to see what it really means, right? We can't just listen to Jordan Maxwell on the internet, right? We got to go to the actual thing that it is dealing with. So they said, okay, well, admiralty is the name of a jurisdiction which takes cognizance of suits or actions which arise in consequence of acts of all transactions and proceedings relative to commerce. Let me see. Let me see. They say what else they got? They say in great maritime nations of Europe, the term admiralty jurisdiction is uniformly applied to courts exercising jurisdiction over maritime contracts and concerns. All right, let me go to another definition. All right, this is Black's Law first. This is the first Black's Law. They define admiral again. So we got to define admiral, right? This one says that admiral, the term admiral is relative to European law. Remember, the first one we just read said they don't have no such thing as an admiral in the United States. And they're talking about federal things. So they said admiral is a European term. They said it is an officer who presided over the admiralities. And then they say in English law, because when you study the Constitution, you're going to have to interpret it how they did in England. Why? Because the Constitution can't be interpreted without reference to the common law of England. So, in order for you to understand the terms in the Constitution and why they would have put certain things in there, well, you're going to have to go to ancient England to understand why they did that. And if you don't understand why the common law of England would be significant to understanding the Constitution, well, then you got to go read the Declaration of Independence, because the Declaration of Independence says that the government wasn't obeying English laws, and that's the thing the people wanted. And as a result, they started their own country so that they can keep the thing that they were trying to take away from them, which was the common law, right? So they say uh, an admiral in English law is a magistrate. And the magistrate has the power to hear all cases belonging to the sea. Right? Very important. They said, what is an admiral? An admiral is a magistrate. Somebody say an admiral is a magistrate. They said he was a judge. They said he was a magistrate. All right. And a magistrate has the power to hear all cases belonging to the sea. All right. That's what a magistrate is. What is an admiralitas? Because this is Latin. So they say admiralitas is admiralty or the admiralty or the court of admiralty. They say in European law, it is an association of private, there's that commercial, private armed vessels for mutual protection and defense against pirates and enemies. All right, so an admiralitas in Latin is admiralty or the admiralty or the court of admiralty. All right, so what is a court of admiralty? They say in European law, because remember, we read the definition, they don't have no such thing as a admiral in the United States. I got a lot of cameras I'm looking at. So this court of admiralty is an association of private armed vessels for mutual protection and defense against pirates and enemies. All right. Now, what is the definition of admiralty in Black's Law Dictionary? The first one came out in 1891. They said a court exercising jurisdiction over maritime causes and commerce and navigation. There we go. That word commerce again. So, what type of court can hear issues of commerce? Admiralty. Admiralty. Not admiralty, admiralty. uh, so they said this admiralty is a court exercising jurisdiction over maritime causes or commerce and navigation or controversies arising out of acts done upon or relating to the sea, and over questions of prize. All right. All right, here we go again. This is another dictionary from the 1900s. I guess it's 1914. They said Admiralty. Now this one they give a little story. They're gonna tell you. They said on the revival of commerce. So this is the definition of Admiralty in the dictionary from the 1900s. And they say a court over maritime causes and criminals. They make a little story they want to tell you. Encyclopedia. They said on the revival of commerce. Okay, well, this Admiralty thing, they keep throwing that word in there. They said on the revival of commerce after the fall of the Western Empire and the conquest and settlement by the barbarians. Say the bar. Don't say it. You're going to get in trouble. They said it became necessary that some tribunal should be established that might hear causes that arose out of maritime commerce. Ships. So talk about ships. All right. They said it became necessary that some tribunal be established that might hear causes that arose out of maritime commerce. They said the rude courts got me. Established that might hear the rude courts established by the conquerors had properly jurisdiction of controversies that arose on land. Let me see this. They said to supply this want, which was felt by the merchants. So who established this? They said to supply this want on the revival of commerce, which was felt by the merchants and not by the government. This is in this dictionary. I didn't come up with none of this. To supply this want, which was felt by the merchants and not by the government, by the people. They said the people didn't. They didn't want no admiralty. They said we didn't create this. We don't know who these people are. They said the government didn't do this either. They said we talked about it yesterday. Y'all remember we talked about commerce? They said this thing is private. They said these people called the Phoenicians established this merchant. They said these are not people didn't want this. The people didn't ask for this. They said this want, not a need. They said this want which was felt by the merchants, not by the government, by the people at large, along the coast of Italy and the northern shores of the Mediterranean Sea. A court of consuls was established in each of the principal maritime cities. Remember, we talked about the maritime sea, the Mediterranean Sea, Africa, right there. Okay, well, these people called the Phoenicians established commerce or the merchants along these different. They created contracts with all these different countries, all these different little nations along the coast. They made one country do one thing, they made another do this one. They say, "Yo, you don't want to obey? Well, we got the goons in this country. They're gonna come handle that. They call them mercenaries." Every time you hear that word "mer," like Admiralty, okay, well, that's all water. Every time you hear Mara, market, okay, that's all sea. Right? They want you to think it ain't got nothing to do with water. It's all got to do with the sea. And the principles are either upon or related to the sea. Right? So they established this Mediterranean Sea, made all these contracts until can be behind the scenes pulling puppet strings and saying, "Hey, go do this for me because I need this obligation. I need you to go spy on these people so I know what move they're gonna make next. And we're gonna create this language." Remember, we talked about this yesterday. They created this thing called phonetics. They created this thing called the alphabet, and they spread this language and this writing system so that they could encode different words and meanings inside of these different languages, right? So even if you speak a different language, Even if you speak Spanish, okay, well, that's all gonna go back there. Even if you the new English that we speak, because remember I told you the Anglo-Saxons prior to William the Conqueror spoke a different type of English than the English we speak today. When William the Conqueror came in ancient England, he changed the language of the court and then ultimately changed the language of what we now know to be English, right? So we don't speak the same English. That so that you it, what I'm trying to say is if it can be Google translated, okay, it all arrives back from the alphabet, which these people called the Phoenicians are called. Um, he said, "Are these our ancestors?" It don't matter. It might be, it might not be. It don't matter to me. If you participate in them, you're subject to the same judgment that is coming to these people. Right? The Bible says that these merchants, that Yeshua, Jesus, kicked them out of the temple. He kicked out those that were buying and selling, and he upset the desk of the money changers. Okay, so if you want to associate with them, you get the same thing that's coming in the book of Revelation, in Revelation chapter 18. So I wouldn't want to associate with these people. Christ said he's going to kick out both the buyers and the sellers. He said both the merchants and their customers. So they said they wanted these courts to be established. To supply this want, which was felt by the merchants and not by the government or the people at large. On the coast of Italy, northern shores of the Mediterranean, a court of consuls was established in each of the principal maritime cities. And they say these customs of the sea, because remember, they're not just because we don't know it comes from the sea, don't mean it ain't from the sea. These are customs that they use along these coastal communities. They made these things. Hey, this is how you do this. This is how you do that, and then they develop a body of this. As a result of being developed to a body of private law already yesterday. They said anytime you hear principal and agency, anytime you hear insurance, anytime you hear bankruptcy, anytime you hear liens, anytime you hear stoppage, anytime you hear banking, okay, well, this is all private law from one group of people. It's not for everybody. Everybody is not supposed to be participating in these things, right? So you're only subject to them if your participation in them is active. Uh, so they said they need a court to deal with this private body of law. They said, okay, bet. We got this thing called Admiralty. And they said these customs of the sea was borrowed from the Roman law. And then they said a copy of which had been discovered in, I don't know how to say that word, Almalfa, something. And they said the usage and trade and practice of the sea collected from time to time over the years, over the centuries, over the generations, and then they published it under a name called the Consulado del Mare. That's an ancient law book. You can probably find it. You probably can't read it, but you can find it. But they've translated it and they've infused it into what we now know to be commercial law. Right? There's only one type of court that can hear commercial. What type of court? An admiralty court. All right. And what do they use? They use the principles of the Roman law. All right. So that is another definition of admiralty law or admiralty. Admiralty is a type of court. All right. Here's another dictionary. They say, again, an admiralty court. They never tell you what it is in the first sentence. You gotta read. If you say, "Oh, well, that's all it is," an attorney will only tell you the first sentence. It's a court which has a very extensive jurisdiction of maritime causes, so that means they only do it on water. No, that's not what that means. You gotta keep reading. Say, admiralty is a court with a very extensive jurisdiction of maritime causes, civil and criminal controversies relating to the sea. Right? That don't mean nothing. They say in the next paragraph that it is the properly successor of the consular courts were emphatically the courts of merchants and seagoing persons. Remember the word merchant, the word commerce or commerce, the word commercial. It's all the same word. It all means sea. And there's one type of court that can hear issues of commerce. Admiralty. All right, so they say that really what Admiralty is the successor of consular courts, which were emphatically the courts of merchants. Tell you, they don't tell you initially, they want you to not pay attention to that part. They say, "Oh, wait, back in the day, wait, back in the day." Like, they don't do it today. They be like, "Oh, yeah, that's how they did that way back in the day." Okay, well, there's such thing as commerce today, okay? Yeah, that's the same shit. It's the same thing, alright? It didn't go nowhere, they just changed names. Remember, I told you I'm not gonna but they used to call them Canaanites, and the Canaanites were hated, 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 hated. They were so hated, they had to change their name. They changed their name to Phoenicians, all right? And then the Phoenicians, over time, they said, "Oh, well, we can master in this thing now. Well, let's go hide in the background and we'll use this thing for merchant." And now we use the word commerce, or really, like I said yesterday, anytime you hear the words of banking, the language of banking, any of the language of the principal and agency, any of the language of insurance and stoppage and carriage and all of these different subjects of law, they call business law or commercial law. Okay, well, this is all it all comes back from one group of people. What else? Yada yada yada. They say this Admiralty thing, they are the courts of merchants. That's a great definition. I need to make sure I remember that. The courts of merchants. Somebody say that. The courts of merchants and seagoing persons. Excuse me. They say in American law, it is a tribunal exercising jurisdiction over all maritime contracts, torts, injuries, or offenses. So they say a maritime contract could just be anything related to commerce. Oh, gonna get in trouble. All right, let me see what else. I got another dictionary here. I got a word again. They say this admiralities thing is an association of private armed vessels for mutual protection. Remember, this is not public stuff. This is not for the public. These are from anytime this private body of law is used, there's only one type of court that can hear it. Does anybody get that? So anytime you hear something related to banking, anytime you hear something related to insurance, anytime you hear something related to agencies, okay, they said that language was not for everybody. That language was for a specific group of people. Anytime you hear these words, they say negotiable instrument. Anytime you hear the word, that's not for your benefit. It's for people who are behind the scenes controlling it. They create, they control it. There's only one type of court. They're gonna pay it off on. There's only one type of court that can hear these issues. Even if they don't call it admiralty, the definition is important. Traffic. All right. Well, traffic is a subject of commerce. Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear issues of traffic. There's only one type of court that can hear issues of licensing and registration and the motor vehicle code. Uh-oh. Why? Because that's all private subjects of law, the private law. He said that's private. That's not for everybody. That's for people who participate. And if you participate, okay, well, there's only one type of court that you end up in. All right. So they say they're not going to define admiralty in this dictionary. They're going to go to the word maritime. They say if you want to know what admiralty is, you got to go to maritime. So I went to maritime, and they say, yeah, coffee cold. All right. They say this thing is pertaining to navigable waters, to the sea, Great Lakes, navigable rivers, or to navigation or commerce. They always be slipping it in at the very end. They want you to read, oh yeah, water, sea, and then they got this thing called commerce. This seems random. Okay, they put it in there on purpose. So maritime, there's no point where the word commerce is not Admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, okay? Get that? I'm not beating a dead horse. I hear scammers fly every day and beat the same garbage. At least I can tell the truth different times the same. Right? So they say anytime you hear something related to the subject of one type of maritime or admiralty court, which they say is the same thing. They say, "You want maritime is, see the word admiralty. Know what admiralty is, see the word maritime. All right. And what else? They got this thing called maritime bills. They got maritime causes of action. I was looking. They got maritime contract. Here we go. Oh, there we go. What's a maritime contract? Oh, a contract related to business of navigation. A contract whose subject matter is related to the navigation of the seas or to trade and commerce. All right, you get it? I know it's annoying. Oh, he keeps saying the same thing. Yep, that's how it works. That's how you learn stuff. You got to see it a million times and like, oh, I'm putting pieces together. All right. They said again, what's a maritime court? A court exercising jurisdiction in maritime causes, one which possesses the powers and jurisdiction of a court of admiralty. Right, knocked out all the definitions. Now we're going to read what the courts have to say about these things. Admiralty. Let's see here. I'll start with my book. The Supreme Court said that from the highest antiquity, so as far back as you can think of, has exercised a very extensive criminal jurisdiction. So you can commit what they call a crime and be subject to criminal jurisdiction. All right. They say admiralty courts exercise a jurisdiction over all maritime contracts. They say their jurisdiction as original maritime jurisdiction is in all seizures or the contravention of revenue laws. Oh, so there's only one type of court that can hear revenue issues. What type of court is that? They say there's only one type of court that can deal with seizures. Seizures, like not seizures, but seizure, like if I seize your bank account or if I seize and tow your car. What type of court that can hear that? What type of court is it? There's only the same. The answer is the same every question I ask. There's only one type of court they can hear. The answer is the same every time, every different question. There's only one type of court. Right? So they say their jurisdiction is over all seizures and over all revenue. Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear those things. Why? Because these are private matters. These are not things related to law. These are things related to international, foreign relations. All right. That's the United States Supreme Court. That's the United States Supreme Court. Um, okay, here we go. This is my favorite one. They said this is water, by the way, for who. They say this power of admiralty is extensive upon land as upon water. They said the Constitution makes no distinction in that respect. They said this admiralty thing works in Idaho the same way it works in Miami, the same way it works in California or Fresno or San Diego. If you go up northeast, the same way it works in Maine or New York or Boston Harbor. They say this admiralty thing works in the middle of Oklahoma. He said this power is extensive upon land as upon water. He said the Constitution makes no distinction in that respect. They say this admiralty jurisdiction is in matters of contract, which the courts of the United States, which are federal courts, may lawfully exercise. They say they exercise this thing to contract on land. They say this admiralty may also embrace this thing called vehicles and persons. They say it would be in the power of Congress. Why? Because Congress is have the power to regulate commerce. Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear issues of commerce. They say it would be within the power of Congress to confer admiralty jurisdiction upon its courts over cars engaged in transporting passengers or merchandise. There goes that word mer again. They say this thing called admiralty denies the parties a trial by jury. It's raining. Sorry. It's raining where I'm at, I think. Or the wind. It don't matter. But um they say this thing called admiralty denies people a trial by jury. That's very important. There's only one thing in the United States Constitution that can deny a trial by jury. That is the admiralty court. You know if you're in an admiralty court or not. Well, is the jury because the jury is supposed to be the judges of the law and the facts. I got a million Supreme Court cases that say it from every state. The jury are the judges. So if you end up in front of a guy in a black robe, there's only one type of court that can be, and that's an admiralty court. Even if they don't call it admiralty, all right? What they say they can be in there over the issue of vehicles. Okay, well, if you're in there over the issue of vehicles, okay, well, guess what kind of court that is, right? They said this admiralty court denies the parties a trial by jury. They say they got these thing called informations that are filed in the court for forfeiture, seizures of property, breach of revenue laws, excuse me, navigation and trade and imposts. And they say they got a little thing called admiralty slash commerce. All right, let me see what else. I'll read all this, but for those who don't know, I'm reading this book, by the way. I have the digital version of this book. I'm reading this book. I'm just reading the digital version of this book. This is 300, almost 300 pages of verifiable information about understanding the courts. This is my book. I read it. Uh, the United States Supreme Court says this admiralty thing is extensive upon land as it is upon water. So anytime somebody tells you, oh, they only do admiralty upon water, they lie straight to your face. Why? Because they know we don't know better. They say the United States Supreme Court said proceedings and causes of equity and of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction are according to the course of the law. Right, I'll get into that quick. They say admiralty acts only in rem, in rem, and no person can be subject to that jurisdiction but by his consent on a contract. All right, let's see here. All right, this is the United States Supreme Court. They said it is well known that in civil cases of equity and admiralty, juries do not intervene. That's the number one thing you need to know about admiralty court. You do not use a jury. Why? The jury is the law of the land. The jury is of the law of England. Anything outside of the common law of England would be by nature international law, right? They don't say international law in the Constitution. What do they say? They say commerce, they say admiralty and maritime jurisdiction or treaties. Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear those issues, and that's an admiralty court. Right? So they say it is well known. They say we should have known this. Courts of admiralty and equity, uh, juries do not intervene. This is the number one thing that complains about the Declaration of Independence. The year before the Declaration of Independence, and the year before the before, the Declaration of Independence. They said that's the number one thing we are strapping up and dropping bodies about is that they are not giving us a trial by jury. All right. So how do you know you're in a court? You're going before a guy in a black robe to hear the whole cause. He's supposed to be officiating the tribunal, the ceremony. But his job is to get you to the jury because the jury are the judges. And I got a million cases. I'm not going to go into it right now. But there's a million cases that say the jury are the judges of the law. For instance, I know this the Constitution of Indiana and the Constitution of Illinois says that. And then the federal constitution says that the trial of all crimes shall be by jury. That's a command. That's not a suggestion. You can't waive it. The Supreme Court of New York said it couldn't be waived. All right. So they say the protections of the Constitution can take effect only by the common law. They say you want the protections of the Constitution, you got to go to that common law stuff. They said the laws and practices of the states cannot be referred to in reference to maritime or admiralty. They said because no equity existed in the states. They said maritime law is too imperfect and unsettled to furnish any basis for the Department of Law of the states. All right, let me see here. I don't want to go. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm going to read like two more cases and I'll keep going. They say, I'm going to read this one. In Admiralty proceedings, the nature of an information would be the complaint. They call it a libel or they call it an information. Does not require the precision of an indictment at common law. Why? At common law, you got to have an injured party, you got to due process. Just be government just can't go after people. That's the common law of England, which is the law of the states. They say in Admiralty, oh, it's based on international law. We stuff. How many times you heard that? Oh yeah, that common law that was old Britain. They don't do that anymore. But Admiralty, the nature of an information does not require all of the precision of an indictment at common law. Because the common law, it requires precision. They said, wow, no equity. Equity is an international term. I'm gonna make a that's gonna be another that'll be another live stream. Tonight is just on Admiralty. Like yesterday was just on commerce. I'm gonna make a whole live stream about Admiralty. Admiralty is a total scam. Everybody who's talking about Admiralty, I bet 1,000 Federal Reserve notes they're fed. Because that's not the common law. That's not what the states are founded upon. And only one thing can take a jury away from you. That is equity and admiralty. I'm actually gonna read you some stuff later that say equity and admiralty are the same thing. So it's all yeah. That's another day. That's another day. That makes me mad more than anything. All right, when people have no clue what equity is, they're gonna get mad. Let me stop. In admiralty, the nature of an information does not require all of the precision of an indictment in common law. This is the United States Supreme Court. All right, because at common law, you got the scrutinize. You can't just be taking stuff from people. You can't just be in prison over fake claims from the government, which require no inter party. Okay, very important. The Supreme Court of Texas said the common law we have adopted in this state. In the same case, they say this common law is the opposite of the civil law rule. What is the civil law? That is the Roman law. We'll get to it in a second. The civil law is the Roman law, and under Roman law, you got admiralty, equity, commercial law, corporation, all of that stuff comes from Rome. Right? The Supreme Court of Texas said the common law is the rule of decision in Texas. We adopted this. The opposite is the civil law. So what's the opposite of the common law? It's the opposite of the Roman law. The opposite of the Roman law is the common law of England as it relates to Texas. Because Texas is its own nation, right? Just like Idaho is its own nation, just like New York is its own nation. It's like California is its own nation. So if there was no other states, Texas said our law is the common law of England. All right. Go. I read this a couple nights ago. Thomas Jefferson said in 1775 that statutes have been passed for extending the courts of admiralty, the jurisdiction of the courts of admiralty beyond their ancient limits. What were their ancient limits? We talked about it. Commerce. Yep. Commerce. The Phoenicians, the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, the merchants. That's their ancient limits. All right. Thomas Jefferson said, sorry, that statutes have been passed for extending the jurisdiction of the courts of admiralty beyond their ancient limits, for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury. There's only one thing that can deprive you of a trial by jury in this country, and that is admiralty courts. All right. Uh, let's see. There was one more thing to read. Boom. This is the United States Supreme Court. They said next to revenue, jurisdiction of the Admiralty are our greatest grievance. They said the courts of Admiralty seem to be forming to overturn our Constitution and to deprive us of our best inheritance, the laws of the land. They said this thing called revenue, which is under, they said that's our huge grievance. And then they said next to that, next to taxes, the jurisdiction of admiralty is our greatest grievance. They said that's the number one thing that is forming to overturn our constitution and to deprive us of our best inheritance, the laws of the land. What's the laws of the land? The common law of England. All right. And that's all I was going to read from that. All right. Now, let's read some other stuff. Let's see here. So this is the Supreme Court of California. The Supreme Court of California said that. Let me go to this, and then I'll go to that. So, admiralty and maritime jurisdiction in the Constitution. What is that? Okay, where does admiralty and maritime come from? It comes from civil law. It comes the definition of the word civil law is the Roman law. Okay, the definition of the word civil law and all that it entails means the exact same word, Roman law. They say ecclesiastical law comes from the Roman law. Equity law comes from the Roman law. We already talked about commerce. That comes from the Roman law. Got an English book that says if you want to understand the Roman law, you got to go study Babylon because that's where they got it from. And then I turned it around again. They said if you want to study Roman law, you got to go to Babylon because that's where they got it from. What we now know to be Roman law. Okay, well, in order to know what that is, you got to keep going back. They said, what Roman law is? Okay, well, you got to go study Babylonian law. They say you want to study Babylonian law. I actually have law books that say this stuff. Okay, you got to go to Egypt. Okay, well, if you want to know the Egypt, you can go to the Bible, and they're going to tell you about these people called the Canaanites. You can follow the trajectory of the Canaanites to the Phoenicians to the merchants. So all of this stuff, if you want to understand Roman law, which is today called the civil law. Anytime you look up the word civil law, they're gonna say anytime you hear the words municipal, corporation, business, commerce, all of this stuff, admiralty and maritime under the Roman civil law. And this word is interchangeable. Matter of fact, I'll pull up the definition. Let's see. Yeah, let's do this one. ABC. Site civil. All right. There we go. Perfect. 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 What is civil law? They say civil law, Roman law, and Roman civil law are convertible phrases. They mean the exact same system of jurisprudence. What is jurisprudence? It's the consciousness of the law. It's the same thing. It's the, mean the exact same system of law. All right, the exact same thinking. They say this is the rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law. So they say anytime you hear the word municipal, that it is of the civil law, which is called the Roman law, right? So anytime you hear the word municipal law, they say this word municipal law is distinguished from the law of nature. Then they tell you this thing called municipal law occupied with exposition and enforcement of civil rights. Okay, well, what does civil mean? It means Roman. That's really what the word means. Let's see here. They said the exposition and enforcement of civil rights. They said this system of jurisprudence held and administered in the Roman Empire. So they say anytime you hear the word relating to civil law, Roman law, Roman civil law, anytime you hear municipal, it is related to Roman law. They say anytime you hear this, it is administered in the Roman Empire. This is the Supreme Court of Louisiana. Why would Louisiana know this? Because they are founded in law. Louisiana is the Roman law. Call it French law, they call it Napoleonic. Okay, when you study France, they've been under Rome forever, forever, ever. Right? So they say this is the system of jurisprudence and administered in the Roman Empire, particularly as set forth in the compilation of Justinian and his successors. Okay, well, go look up who Justinian is. He was a Roman emperor. And they say you can find this Roman civil law in the Code of Justinian, the digest, and the novels called the Corpus Juris Civilis, which is the name of the body of civil law. And they say that this is distinguished or the opposite of the common law of England. Okay. So what's the opposite of the common law of England? The Roman law. And that it entails, of which maritime jurisdiction is under. Okay. And that's the Supreme Court of Louisiana. They say this Roman law is used in contradistinction to the laws of England and those of the respective states. Boom. That's the Supreme Court of Louisiana under the definition in a law dictionary of Roman law. All right. So, uh, civil law, Roman law, same thing. Under Roman and civil law, we have ecclesiastical law. Under ecclesiastical law, they use no jury. They use priests who wear robes and conduct ceremonies. Does this make sense? So how do you know you're in an admiralty court? There's no jury. That's the number one reason. That's the number one thing they wanted after the Revolutionary War. We just want to trial by jury, and we want due process. Okay, well, under ecclesiastical law, you don't get that. So they said, this is how you know you're in admiralty court. All right, so we already defined admiralty and maritime. All right. In rem in personam. All right, I got a bunch of stuff on that. Oh, I only been on here an hour. Oh, y'all ain't getting no real work. All right, let's see here. In rem. They said How do I? There we go. There we go. All right. I forgot. This is under the definition of courts. I'm talking about the word admiralty in the United States Constitution. They said the word, or this is under the definition of courts. So they say under the subtitle suits on contracts. So any type of lawsuit related to contracts, they said as a court of admiralty, this court has jurisdiction. Jurisdiction on what? On contracts. They said the same may be made or executed on whatever form of the contract. So any contract is under a court of admiralty. All right. So even if you don't think it's a contract, if you end up in front of one guy in a black robe instead of the people, okay, then you know what type of court it is. All right. So they said, as a court of admiralty, it possesses a general jurisdiction. What is a general jurisdiction? What's jurisdiction? The power of the courts to hear and decide a case. All right. They possess suits in rem, REM, and in personam. So in rem and in personam. And if you don't believe me, go to whatever state codes you have, search the phrase in rem. In rem, REM, in space rem. So you can be in rem. All right. The word in rem means a thing, and that's a Latin phrase, and it means jurisdiction over a thing. All right. So they say it again. Okay. Well, what is in personam? They say proceedings. Again, this is jurisdiction of the courts to have proceedings against a person. Okay. Well, what's a person? To them, a person is not me and you. A person is a legal fiction. It is a corporation. All right. It is a fiction first and foremost. What is a fiction? In our reality, it's most likely a state ID, just to be real clear. All right. Because that is a fiction. It's not real. It's a piece of paper. It's a fake piece of plastic. Right. It's not real. It's a fiction. All right. To them, to be in personam is to wear a mask. So they say there's two types of persons at all. You have a natural person, which is identified by your face, and then they say they have a fictitious person, which is to wear a mask. Okay, well, a state ID is not real, right? They may call it real ID, but there's no such thing as a real ID because there's no ID that is actually real. It's a piece of paper. It's a photograph. It's not real. It's not you. You're not a piece of plastic, right? So in reality, they're really not making judgments against you. They're making judgments against that state ID or that driver's license or what I'm about to get into in REM. Okay, well, they say in REM is proceedings or actions constituted against or instituted against a thing. All right. Well, what is the thing? You wouldn't believe how many things we got that is in their jurisdiction. All right. Every bank account is in REM. Every car, almost every car, unless you're rich, which you wouldn't be watching me if you were rich. I'm not rich either. Is in REM. Um, what else? I mean, really, probably every piece of paper. If you've registered anything, uh, I mean, I don't want to get too conspiracy theorist, or I don't want to scare anybody, but like, it's a lot of stuff that's in REM. And this is how you know in a nutshell, just to make it simplified. If it can be seized before the court proceeding, before you go to court, if it can be taken, if it can be seized, if it can be frozen, if it can be towed before you go to court, okay, well, that's a thing in because that's what admiralty is. What is an admiralty? What is an admiral? Well, he's the chief officer in the Navy. Well, what's a Navy? It's the military. So they want you to think it's that this is military jurisdiction. This is a tribunal. Yep, the word property. If you've ever registered property, or if your property is in their system, in the public domain, Okay, well, that's to them, that's in rem. If they can show up and take it before you go to court over the issue, okay, because due process says you can't take people's life or property before court, before the court case, right? I'm working on a book on false imprisonment. Well, you can't, you're not supposed to go to, you're not supposed to be put in handcuffs before the court case unless they actually got you for a breach of peace, which always means violence, which always means an injured party. But that's another topic for another day. So they say, okay, in rem is against the thing. All right. So in Latin, they say in rem. In English, they say against the thing. All right. Well, if they can seize it before the court case, well, then that's how you know it is a proceeding in rem. All right. So if somebody makes a claim or something, or some corporation or organization makes a claim against you and they can seize that thing before the court case, before the judgment has been had, okay, that's how you know you're in an admiralty court, or that's how you know that's an admiralty action. All right, they said the courts of admiralty enforce the performance of a contract by what? By seizing it. I told y'all earlier that word seizing is a commercial term into their custody. So they said this is how we start to act. This is how we started off rip. We got to take it first. Well, that's how you know it's an admiralty. This is what they fought the Revolutionary War over. They said cases of admiralty are either in personam or in rem. And then here we go. I forgot about these. Let me zoom in. They say a policy of insurance is in rem. They say yada yada yada. They say in all civilized countries, what does civil mean? Roman is governed by the same rules. All Europe have derived their maritime codes from the Mediterranean. They said in this country, the United States Supreme Court said in this country, we got ours from the Consulado del Mare. Okay, well, what's that? That's the law of the sea. Mari. That word M with an A or ER is sea. They said the jurisdiction of the admiralty in matters of contract depends on the character of the contract, whether maritime or not. So they don't even have to call it maritime. It could be in a contract. There's only one type of court that can hear it. They said it has been settled that the common law is the law of Maryland. And they said maritime law following the civil law gives the party a lien. There you go. That's another commercial term for security to maintain a suit in rem in the admiralty. But they said in cases of the state, no lien is to be implied. Why? Because Maryland's law, just like your state law, is the common law of England. And common law, you're not allowed to take people's stuff for a court proceeding. You can take it after a judgment, a lawful judgment of your peers. That's what the Magna Carta says. So how do you know it's admiralty? If they say that's how they start the court. That's how they start the court action. They take it first. Okay, they're not allowed to do that in the states. They say a jurisdiction of the admiralty may be enforced in personam as well as in rem. They say the true doctrine of the learned judges of the admiralty say that the judges of the jurisdiction of contracts depends upon the subject matter and not if it's admiralty or maritime or not. That's a district court of Massachusetts. So they say they don't have to call it admiralty if it fits within our subject, which is all federal, by the way. Okay, well, that's what they say. This is another definite or translation of the word in rem is subject matter. So they'll say a thing in plain English, but they're gonna say subject matter. If they use the word subject matter, okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear subject matter things. All right. Let's see here. So that was in Rim Part 1. Rim Part 2, they got some Latin. Let's see here. I don't know if any of this is necessary. Oh, they got this thing called quarrels. This is an ancient English term that says use they create quarrels by rem and in personam. Quarrels is actually under the term of barratry, and there's only one type of people that can do barratry, and they're called attorneys. All right, they say Admiralty law, a ship or cargo is arrested, and they are arrested by a marshal with a writ of an action in rem. All Admiralty. Uh, Let me see. They say cargo may be proceeded against in the respect of any liability. The cargo may be arrested. So what gets arrested? People are not supposed to be arrested. Only property can be arrested. This is nasty. This is nasty, y'all. That's why they don't show my live to nobody. They let the scammer get to. I seen a scammer get 170 people watching his live today. Man, you straight lying. They don't talk about you can't tell the truth on here, boy. Right? They say only property can be arrested. They say only ships and cargo may be arrested as security for the freight that may be due. They said if the cargo be aboard the ship, it can be proceeded against and named in a warrant. Oh, they say this word warrant is a maritime term. They said the cargo will be warehoused. Okay, well, what's a warehouse? Well, today they call it a jail. Then they called it a warehouse. They probably could still call it a warehouse on the sea. And they say a separate arrest can be made for the property or the ship, depending on the issue. So they say an arrest binds the whole of the property, however great the value, however trifling the amount of the claim. They say a person having a possessory lien. That's a commercial term. He must surrender the property to the marshal and rely upon the court to protect him in his. Oh, that's supposed to work. So yeah, they got a whole bunch of stuff here. Every time you hear the word in rem, go to your state codes, type in rem, see if a million codes and statutes don't come up. Everything's in rem now, baby. Everything. So they got a whole bunch of stuff. I'm trying to see if there's anything I need to highlight. But yeah, they got a whole bunch of stuff on in rem. Let's see. And proceedings are actions against the thing. Personal actions are in personam. So you're saying courts are operating under maritime law. A lot of the actions against people are. I'm saying every action against people are improper. The states are not supposed to be doing admiralty law. So admiralty law, that's why I'm specifically related to the federal constitution. The feds do have admiralty and maritime jurisdiction because it's primarily dealing with international things. They both abuse it. The states are not ever supposed to be doing admiralty, and the feds are not supposed to be doing admiralty against people in the states. So we got two issues. We have the states who are not supposed to be doing admiralty at all. They're never supposed to be seizing property or enforcing admiralty actions, either in personam or in rem. And then the feds are not supposed to be enforcing it against the states. They're only supposed to be enforcing it internationally, things that are upon the waters of international sea, upon the sea, which are international waters, right? But they're using these in metaphysical terms. And then now this is equally our fault because we have been ignorant and also participate in these actions, right? Because of our ignorance, they get to abuse their power. Is court in international water. If you end up before one guy in a black robe to decide your life or property, yes. A trial by jury is a lawful court in the states. We were never supposed to be dealing with the feds. The feds are for international things. That's what the federal constitution is about. So people always talk about the common or the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Okay, well that ain't for us. We have a constitution. Our states have constitutions. If you live in Florida, Florida has a constitution, and that is the supreme law of the land for Florida. Texas has a constitution. Idaho has a constitution. Oklahoma got a constitution. California got a constitution. And not one time will you find in any of the state constitutions anything related to admiralty or maritime jurisdiction. They don't have the power to do it. But they do it every day, don't they? They do it every day. Let me who is this? Okay. This is a very important case. I'm gonna give you this case. This is so I will just Google 95 US 745 US 714. I think it's called Panower versus Neff. This is a Supreme Court case. They will tell you that is one of the great cases that will teach you about jurisdiction and uh in REM. All right, that's a very good case. Everybody should be reading and knowing that case. They say jurisdiction is acquired in one or two modes against the person by the service of process or by a procedure against the property. Okay, that's in REM. They say within the jurisdiction, the defendant is not personally bound by the judgment beyond the property in question. So if they can just judge the property, which they're not supposed to be doing, then you know it's in REM. They say it. When they judge the property in question, it is substantially a proceeding in REM. IN space REM. All right. So you can go Google that word, see if somebody makes some videos on it, whatever. All right. So yeah, that's okay. Here we go. Here's another one. Who's this? Oh, I have a law book on Admiralty. They say Admiralty libels, which is a Admiralty complaint against somebody or something, are in two sorts: in personam and in rem. They say in personam against somebody who is named in the lawsuit, and then they say a corporate person asserting a personal ability. Then they say in rem is virtually unknown outside of Admiralty. So that's anytime you hear the word in REM, it is exclusively Admiralty. I use that term in any context related to courts. They say in REM is 100% Admiralty. They say virtually its nature is of a maritime lien. In American Admiralty law, a maritime lien is the lawsuit in REM. That's the number one one. I should have circled that. All right, let me see who else. Who is this? This is they say in REM cases can only be prosecuted district court where the property is found. But remember, they're gonna seize it first. That's how you know it's in REM. Uh, they say the suit in REM can be prosecuted in the district where the property is found. They say libels in REM are of civil or maritime, and it shall state the nature and cause, yada yada yada. If it is a civil and maritime contract, they say if the libel is in REM, then the property is within the district. If it's persona, the name and the place of the resident. All right. They say a suit in REM cannot be maintained without a service of process on the property. All right. Let me knock those out. So NREM, somebody say NREM, NREM, IN space bar REM. Type that in the comments. All right, 124. Give me 30 more minutes. All right, let's see what else I want to read. All right. So I started this by reading the Supreme Court of California. They said, I don't know if I actually read this, but I'm going to read it again. The Supreme Court of California said that to proceed in REM is distinctly an admiralty remedy. The Supreme Court of California said no state can confer jurisdiction upon its courts to proceed in REM. They say even Louisiana, which is founded on the civil law, they can't do it either. Why? It's not in their constitution. Constitutions create government. That is the thing that tells the government what it can and can't do. If it's not in there, they can't do it. The Supreme Court of California said no state can do it. Why? It's not in their constitution. When they created the feds, when they created this federal corporation, they gave that power to the feds. Now, the feds aren't supposed to be doing it against the states, but that's a different topic, right? But as far as it relates to the states cannot confer jurisdiction upon its courts to proceed against things. So if they seize it before the court case, it's against the law for them. So that's the Supreme Court of California. I actually have another case. Actually I've been finding these in other states, but specifically California, Washington State, and the Supreme Court of Georgia. They explicitly say no state can confer jurisdiction on its courts to proceed in REM. Let's see. Let's see. This is a federal Supreme Court case. They say maritime law was thought to be an international law merchant. Anytime you're dealing with commerce, there's only one type of court that can do that. So commerce or commercial actions would give them in rem jurisdiction. And you would be amazed how much stuff is commerce that we don't even think about. Like, dang, that's a commercial action. Dang, that's a commercial action. If it's a commercial action, it can be seized because it was never ours to begin with. And that's a whole topic for another day. But you got to understand that. So all these scammers on the internet talking about negotiable instruments, equity. Okay, well, all that subjects you to the will of one guy in a black robe. You don't have no rights with that. Kinda. If there's an actual injured party, a grand jury indictment, and a trial by jury, that is a common law court, and it has nothing to do with commerce. That is the law of the land. So not all courts are commerce. They may be by the result of our ignorance, but that's not technically true. All courts are not commercial. Most courts are commercial. That's a good statement. 95%, right? But if there's an actual injured party, there's an actual grand jury indictment, and there's a petite jury, a common law jury. Okay, well that's an actual Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court, this is not this is free. This ain't got nothing to do with Admiralty. But the Supreme Court doesn't federal judges and judges who are actually magistrates don't make law. They don't create law. Who are the judges of the law? In your state, the judges of the law are the jury. So I'm citing Supreme Court cases all day, all throughout this, right? But that's not the law. They don't make law. They make opinions and they have findings and they give answers based on the constitutionality of the thing that is brought before them. But technically, if you just got a trial by jury, see, you only make it to the Supreme Court if you keep going through magistrates and then you appeal the magistrates. Okay, so all of that is admiralty by virtue of who they are. But if you just had actual community and we actually were unified in a county, if we had one good county, okay, and the county was informed that the jury are the actual judges of the law and of the fact, okay, well, we're the Supreme Court every time because we wouldn't let any case go through. The grand jury wouldn't let any case go through where there was no injured party. And if there was an actual injured party, okay, well, then the jury, the petite jury, are the judges of the law and of the fact because that is the common law of England. That is the law of each of the states. And we could nullify whatever would take away our rights, and we could rightfully punish those who create injured parties, right? So that would be the real Supreme Court because we would be the ones in charge. That's how it's supposed to be. That's what I'm telling you. We're not supposed to be going before people in black. Those guys are supposed to be referees. They're supposed to make sure the tribunal and the ceremony go good. And if you go to the Supreme Court and all these magistrate courts, okay, well, they're for international things. They have to if you go to a guy in a black robe and he rules against you, okay, well, you have to keep appealing to go up to the and they drag that out. People sit in jail and prisons, don't even go to court because they're subject to the will of a magistrate, right? Okay, well, if he got brought before the jury, well, an informed jury would know, okay, with no injured party, okay, yeah, well, we're going to lunch. We're not dealing with this foolishness. Stop bringing cases up to us, or we're going to perform a grand jury indictment against the ones who keep creating cases where there are no injured parties, right? That's the way it's supposed to be. That's where I really get in trouble, right? Because if we all move to the same county and we start having barbecues and getting up free food every weekend and start informing the people that they're the real judges of the law and that they're not allowed to allow cases where there are no injured party because that would be a commercial matter and that's based on international things. And we throw out every case related to Admiralty, related to commerce. Okay, well, yeah, that's why they don't show my that's why they don't show my live to people. You understand now? Somebody might have actually figured it out. It's like, oh, this common law of England thing's bigger than they thought. Oh, they fought the Revolutionary War over it. Oh, yeah, that must be a big deal, right? So they say maritime was thought. This is the United States Supreme Court. They say maritime law is international law. It is the international law merchant. It is commercial law. And they said it is administered by the several maritime nations of the world. They said this is international law, baby. Anytime you hear admiralty or maritime, or anytime you hear NREM, or anytime you hear anything related to commerce, there's only one type of court that can hear it: an international tribunal, or the several maritime nations of the world. You know what they call it? Nations. All right. What else? Here we go again. This is the United States Supreme Court 2024. This is very important. So uh, they said the right to a trial by jury is of such importance, occupies so form a place in our history and jurisprudence that any seeming curtailment of the right has always been and should be scrutinized with the utmost care. So this is the United States Supreme Court in 2024. They said the commentators recognize the right as the glory of the English law. And they cite William Blackstone. And they say it was prized by the American colonists. They said this is the one thing we want above anything is a trial by jury in all cases, civil or criminal. They said when the English, they're talking about the British government, began evading American juries by siphoning adjudications to the juryless admiralty, vice admiralty, and chancery courts. They said this is the accusation that the American colonists at the Revolutionary War said this is the reason why we're strapping up and dropping bodies. Is because the British government began evading not giving us a trial by jury and was bringing us before guys in black robes. Understand that? They said the Supreme Court said this in 2024. They said the juryless admiralty. Okay, well, what happens in the admiralty court? You do not get a trial by jury. You are subject to the will of a guy in a black robe. And they say this is in chancery courts. What's chancery? Equity. So that's not the law of the land. So that's international law. They said Americans condemned the British Parliament for subverting the rights and liberties of the colonists. They said representatives demanded that Parliament respect the great and inestimable privilege of being tried by their peers of the vicinage according to the common law. You know where that phrase is taken out of? Magna Carta. They said that the British government continued to try Americans without juries, and the founders cited the practice as a justification for severing ties with the British government. They said that's the one reason why they did it, because of this thing called Admiralty. What does Admiralty do? It keeps you from getting a trial by jury. It keeps you from being before lawful judges. And then they cite a law book. They said, now this law book is, they said having to subvert the kingdom. So they're talking about England, having endeavored to subvert the constitution of the kingdom. What's the constitution of the kingdom? The Magna Carta. Having endeavored to subvert the constitution of the kingdom, breaking the original contract between king and the people, which is the Magna Carta, by the advice of Jesuits and other wicked persons, violated the fundamental laws. They said other duties in the British colonies by imposing taxes on the inhabitants of these colonies, by extending the jurisdiction of the courts of Admiralty beyond its ancient limits. They're citing Thomas Jefferson, and for subverting the rights and liberties of the colonists. So, what does the Admiralty do? It keeps you from getting a trial by jury, which is against the law in America. All right. This is from a law book on Admiralty. They say, as a, they're giving philosophy. All right. I don't know another way to say it. They say the ship, any type of ship, what kind of ships? Relationships, scholarships, citizenships, right? These are ships to them. They said the ship is a relic of barbarism. All right. So, who created ships? Who created metaphysical ships? The bar. They said in prehistory and in antiquity, the carriage of goods and people over great distances. This is related to Admiralty law. They say Admiralty law uh, started with this thing called the Rhodian law. Rhodian, Rhodian. Rhodian. That would have been the first, like, I don't know, law books on Admiralty. They wouldn't have called it Admiralty like that. They would have just said maritime. So they say in prehistory and in antiquity, the carriage of goods and people over great distances. All right. So this where all this traffic issues. You see people on YouTube complaining about the right to travel and all this. Okay, they say, well, all of this is where this comes from. All right. They say this transportation in the world of commerce from the earliest times until comparative modern ones, all traffic under the definition of commerce on land was subject to All right. So any traffic issues, there's only one type of court that deals lawfully or there's only one type of court that deals with the origin of the words admiral and admiralty. They said as manufacturing progressed, commerce develops. Okay, so how do they develop industrial revolution through all of these great word innovation? That's not the word. Innovation. When they have the ability to strip things down, that's not the word. But whenever they can make a big process, word, you know what I'm saying. Whenever they can, some word related to efficient, well, the way they can make something a process more efficient. Okay, as manufacturing gets more streamlined, as they make things more easier and convenient, okay, well, commerce is going to naturally develop. I said this the other day. Simplify, that's another word. As I said it, you know, I talked about cash versus swiping debit cards. Okay, they make, I mean, you got Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, all type of pay now, right? They just, well, it would be crazy not to use a debit card now for everything, right? You can use Cash App, you can use whatever, name it. Okay, well, as manufacturing, streamlining, and efficiency and simplifying develops, convenient, yep. Okay, well, commerce is gonna explode, and it would be crazy for you not to participate in commerce. Come on now. I remember I tell y'all all the time about the TV show 1923. This dude introduces to these people in Montana the washing machine and the refrigerator. He says, "Oh yeah, everybody doing this in New York. What you mean? What you mean you're not gonna participate? Oh, they already on the grid. We got this thing called the grid, and everybody's on electricity. You pay us monthly for electricity. You ain't gonna want to live without this thing called electricity." They They said, "What do you mean?" That dude, the father of the family, he said, "Well, if I get on your electricity and then use everything and buy everything that requires electricity." Well, he said, "Well, I'm not working for myself anymore. I'm working for you." Okay, well, that's what they say. As manufacturing progresses, well, commerce develops, and commerce immediately requires transportation. This transport was almost invariably by water. Okay, who mastered this water thing? These merchants from Canaan and Phoenicia. Okay, well, they say this transportation of all of these streamlining processes, transport was almost invariably by water. They say the ancient world was situated around the shores of the great ocean. Later, as they say, traffic on land was subject. So they say they built roads. That word roads is a maritime term because it came from the Rhodian law. They say as commerce develops, okay, well, we got to figure out a way to get this thing from the ports to the craziest part of a place called Oklahoma, to the mountains in Utah, to the mountains in Colorado, to Wyoming. Y'all seen these clips on TikTok where the truck drivers, the wind is so crazy that the 18 wheeler flips over? Okay, they said this commerce, baby, we got to get it out there. They said we're gonna put a Walmart everywhere, or all Dollar General. They gonna put a Dollar General everywhere. It's a Dollar General in the craziest places. Y'all. You been to Mississippi? Boy, they got a Dollar General everywhere in the middle of nowhere, right? They said as commerce, as manufacturing progresses, right? They said, "Oh, you put what? Let me, This is a great transition. Ships. Okay, how do we get things? Everything in our reality comes off of a ship. A great segue. Everything. I said this the other day. Everything in our reality comes off a ship. It comes off of a ship from another country, and it gets immediately on an 18 wheeler. and then that 18 wheeler goes from the port to wherever. Think of the craziest place, South Dakota. You ever been in South Dakota? Oh my gosh, they got crazy mountains in South Dakota. They got crazy hills. You ever been to the middle of Pennsylvania? Bro, it ain't nothing but mountains and woods. You ever been to West Virginia? They take that thing from the port to the mountains of West Virginia. They take that thing to the middle of nowhere. You ever been to Nevada? Okay, there's nothing out there. Nothing. They built a whole thing called Las Vegas. Las Vegas is in the middle of nowhere, y'all, in the desert. Like, I get New York. That's how they got us. They knew it because they changed New York. That's why New York is the way it is now. New York, they were the first to get commerce for real. That's why New York will always have the latest. They'll always have the newest shows, movies, advertising. You wanna know what commerce looks like? Go to Times Square in New York City. Okay, well, they spread that everywhere. You go to a place like Utah, there's not supposed to be a place called Salt Lake City. You know, Salt Lake City, they got, I mean, that's all commerce. You been to Los Angeles, they're on the water, so I give them that. I'll give Miami that. I'll give New York that. I'll give Washington State that or Seattle that. But like Oklahoma, come on now. Everything in our reality comes off of a ship. As see, really what they should say is as manufacturing progresses, commerce develops, right? Well, as production stops, then commerce will develop because commerce is really defined as I'm trying not to get the reflections of the monitor. Well, and I know you can't see this, but selling is commerce. That's really what it is. You go to commerce, they say it's buying and selling. Definition of merchant is they say they use ships to buy and sell. It's people who own ships. Okay, well, buying and selling is not producing. That's how Walmart works. Walmart don't produce something. What do? They buy it from a manufacturer, somebody who manufactures it, and they sell it to people who buy it. So it's just that's why they call it retail, right? They didn't tailor it, they retailed it, right? So Walmart, Walmart, you name it, Target, whoever, Costco, whoever. Okay, well, they don't produce anything. They just build it. They create a market, right? And that's all. I go to Walmart. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not special. I'm just saying this how it works because we don't produce anything anymore. We don't know how to clean clothes without a washing machine. We don't know how to preserve food without a refrigerator. They say, okay, well, as we make things more convenient, you're not going to want those things anymore. And we will get you on commerce. Okay, well, the same thing happened to our law. As we stop hearing about the law, as we stop talking about the common law of England, as we stop doing trial by juries and start hiring these people called attorneys, okay, well, as they streamline that process, they can take our rights. How? Because we don't do things for ourselves anymore. You understand how Admiralty works now? Admiralty is really a military jurisdiction. They said commerce develops through ease and convenience. Ease and convenience. That's what these merchants master. They said, how do we make this thing so easy that they don't have no choice but to participate? Right? How do we get them? If we can make it on a mass scale, that's really what commerce is. Commerce is on a mass scale. Because if you produce the food from your land and then you sold it to your community, well, that's not considered commerce. I remember I watched, I don't know if it was a TikTok or a YouTube video or a news article, but I guess I don't pay attention to the facts. Apparently, Donald Trump shut down people selling from China, whatever. They were beefing with China or something. And these farmers in Arkansas were complaining that they weren't making the money they had because they couldn't interact with China or whatever it was. And I was like, because you relied on the manufacturing process instead of taking care of the people in Arkansas, okay, well, now you're suffering because if you don't have access to China no all our crap comes from, right? All of our cameras, phone, they all come from Asia, right? Because it's cheap labor, right? Yeah, tariffs, whatever. Okay, well, if if these farmers would have invested in the people of Arkansas, they would have the people of Arkansas would have always taken care of. But because you don't produce anything and you don't allow the people of Arkansas to produce things, I'm just using Arkansas as an example. Okay, well, commerce is what you're subject to. And when commerce fails you and you can't produce things on your own, all right, well, this is the reality of what you're complaining about. Because if you just produced in Florida and sold it to the people in Florida, see, it would be different. See, how the country started is we would sell to other countries. Well, now other countries sell to us. We're not supposed to be taking from other countries. We're supposed to be selling to other countries. That would be okay. That would be lawful. Right. They produce things cheaper overseas. And now, because it's so cheap overseas and it's seemingly more expensive here, well, if it started off with just people there, they would have never had to worry about that. But now everything in our reality is international. You go look at the can, almost none of our food is from any of the states anymore. They say they get our steaks from Argentina, all our cat. They say they do all that there. They say they get our beans and potatoes from Mexico. We don't do nothing here. Why? Because people relied on the ease and convenience of commerce. They said, "Oh, if they can manufacture it overseas, we don't have to produce things here because it's more costly. It's harder to produce it here." Right? So they say this is how commerce develops, and there's only this is on a book. They're talking about commerce, and this is a book on Admiralty. It's called The Law of Admiralty, and they're talking about commerce. Okay? What type of court? Making your commercial things. They said uh, traffic on land is subject to commerce. That's how they do it. How do they get things from point A to point B? A ship today in 2025, a ship and an 18 wheeler. Well, why is it cheaper to produce things overseas? Primarily because commerce has already engulfed those nations, so they deprive them. Remember, it's only one group of people producing commerce, and so commerce really steals from you. And so all these other nations have been on commerce for years. It took a while for them to get to us. They had to wait till the Civil War to get to us because before then we produced things in the states, right? And they use child labor, all type of stuff. Is it really cheaper? No, probably not. Probably remember, as manufacturing, it's easier now. They've been doing this for years, and we haven't been doing this for years. We haven't been producing things here since the Civil War on a grand scale. So they've been producing things and having a manufacturing process that is streamlined in our reality since the Civil War. So because China can produce an iPhone probably like that, they probably snapping together iPad. They can produce it. They got machines that can produce a phone. They say this phone costs $1,000. That phone costs $2 to produce because they got robots and stuff now. Y'all, come on, y'all know they got vending machines that'll okay. Well, they've been doing software for a year. They've been snapping together iPad. That iPad don't cost no $500. That iPad costs $11, and then they sell it to us for $11 or for $1,100. Right, so we have to produce things on our own. That's what I'm getting to. That's not I'm not here to talk about commerce. I'm just telling you how it works. All right. What else? Let me read. I'm trying to wrap this up. I'm almost at 2 hours. Uh, I got a Supreme Court case that says The courts of admiralty are in contradistinction to the common law. Right? Delete that. Juryless admiralty. Commercial law is international law, particularly administered by several courts. Okay, this is another thing. I said this earlier, but I got a law book on the law of evidence, and let's say admiralty courts procedure is founded on the ecclesiastical law and uses no jury. So very important. Here's another one. I have a book called Admiralty and Federalism on the Patreon, and it says that concerning the Revolutionary War, they say the situation was critical. They said if the governor's courts had no admiralty jurisdiction, the juries in the common law courts would not convict, then the vessels would escape condemnation and illicit trade would flourish, and the king's revenue would be impaired. Okay, they're not talking about ships; they're talking about people, right? Because common laws don't have no issues with court, don't aren't dealing with anything related to ships. All right, so they lying straight to our face. So they say these governor courts had no jurisdiction. What are governors? They are military officers. If you study governors, that's a military term. So they said these military courts would not have jurisdiction, and the juries are not dealing with issues related to vessels. All right, so they're talking about people. All right, and over this issue of revenue, right? Because revenue is supposed to be related to ships. I'm gonna get into that. Hold on, let me read this real quick. So they say they used to beef. They said the military courts never had jurisdiction. The common law courts, which are the people, would not convict people over revenue issues. All right. They said vessels would escape condemnation and the king's revenue would be impaired. They say he wasn't getting paid off of us. All right, so that was the law book. Another law book on admiralty. This is not an American law. I think it's a British law book. They say this admiralty thing, the jurisdiction of admiralty is in rem and in personam. And then again, admiralty courts do not use jury. Now, there is another thing. They do say if they call it a crime, even if it's admiralty, if they call it a crime, you're supposed to get a jury in America. Okay? So if they call it a crime, you're supposed to get a jury. All right. They say this is the United States Supreme Court. They say criminal causes of admiralty must be tried by a jury. Okay? You cannot call something a crime here and not get a jury. Why? Because the jury are the judges of the law. All right. Yada yada yada. All right. Now this is who is this? This is William Blackstone. I thought it was from a case. All right. So William Blackstone. This is who the founders or the framers of the Constitution would have been from as they create the Constitution, state and federal. They say that well, he has a topic called military and maritime courts, and that term is interchangeable. All right. So this is William Blackstone. This is William Blackstone. Book three. He wrote 4 books, so this is book three on private books. So they say military and maritime courts have cognizance of contracts touching the deeds of arms and war, which could not be determined or discussed by the common law. Right? So there's a distinction between maritime courts, which are military courts, and the common law courts. They say maritime and admiralty courts have jurisdiction to cause to determine all causes rising upon the sea, and not within any county, not within land. They say there are no county, maritime, and military courts of civil jurisdiction. So they're not supposed to be doing admiralty even in England in the counties. You understand that? And I can't prove it just yet, but I've been researching it. That's why they say the sheriff is important because technically federal things are not supposed to be happening in the states without permission from the sheriff. That's another topic I really haven't delved into. Uh, yeah, I'm not gonna read all that, but yeah. So, all right, now this is the last thing I got on this. Go a little over. They say in this country, a court of admiralty acts upon equity principles. Okay, so equity is enforced in admiralty courts. Why? Because it brings you before one judge. It brings you before one guy in a black robe. Right? That's as simple as it goes. They say a court of equity would relieve where a court of law could not. So they say there's a difference between this thing called equity and this thing called law. I'm gonna make a whole live stream about that one day, real soon, probably next week. Understand there is equity is not the law. Equity issues are still in a court of admiralty. Okay, that's the United States Supreme Court. And then that's really it. There's a lot of other stuff, and I'm not going to read that. All right. Again, the Supreme Court of California said proceed in rem is distinctly an admiralty remedy. No state can confer jurisdiction upon its courts to proceed in rem. All right. Now, this is the fun part. I'm almost done. I'm just going to read my personal notes on the topic of admiralty and maritime. Let's see here. Some stuff I've already read. So the word charge in a legal term is an admiralty maritime term. The word arrest is a maritime term. The word warrant is a maritime term. The word marshal is a maritime term. The word bank is a maritime term. Y'all know that? Let's see. I don't even remember where this law book is from, but they talk about admiralty. They say admiralty. They say private commercial concerns must be enforced in a court of admiralty. They say must be resorted to for private commercial concerns. The Code of Washington State. So they said the revised Code of Washington says the impoundment of a vehicle operated in violation of whatever code that is a civil action in rem. Are they allowed to do in rem? No. They say they don't do admiralty on land, but that's a lie. Everything in our existence comes off of a ship. Our food, our clothes, our cars, our technology, in all industries related to commercial, private commercial concern. All commerce is private. All commercial concerns are private. That's what I'm saying. It comes from one group of people called the merchants, which are the Phoenicians, which is currently in Rome. Who do you know that's in Rome today? Who's in charge of Rome today? They said this admiralty thing, whose procedure was founded on the ecclesiastical law. Okay, well, who's doing ecclesiastics in Rome today? All issues of commerce is private because it's not ours. Commerce means a law merchant. There's only one group of people called merchants on the planet. They say that word Phoenician is the word merchant. They say the word Canaanite is the word merchant. They say that's in the book of Ezekiel and the book of Job, that the word Canaanite or the word Phoenician means the word merchant. That's what the word means. They say anytime you hear the word commerce, anytime you hear the word commercial, that is Private, private to us, private to the people who created it. They said they took this thing called commerce from Egypt to Babylon to Rome. All right, well, who's in charge of Rome today? And who does religious things all day in Rome? So everything related to commerce is private. Somebody said the government can't, but a lender can. Well, no, nobody can. Yep, that's the right answer. So we're not supposed to be participating in lending, right? I read it earlier. They said, and maybe I'll pull it up. See, let me turn this off. I'm done with the. They said this law merchant or mercantile law. This is in a book called Business Law. All right. So they say this law merchant or mercantile law was the comprehensive body of privately administered rules and customs. Okay. So who's the lender? The lender is a merchant. That's private law. You entered into a private contract with somebody from another nation when you went to the bank. There's no banks here. There are no American banks. There's no such thing as an American bank. We get that? There's no such thing as an American bank. When you went to the bank and said, I need a loan for a car, okay, well, you dealt with private international merchants. And there's only one people doing merchants, right? So they said the law merchant or mercantile law or commercial law or business law is the comprehensive body of privately administered rules and customs. Okay. Enforced as law by merchants. So anybody saying they're enforcing some law that has to do with commerce, whether you think it's commerce or not, okay, well, that's enforced by merchants. Those are the people that created the thing that we're surrounded by. They said throughout the medieval commercial world, especially in the Italian city states. Okay, well, where did these merchants, where did they go? I can't, I don't know where I'm pointing, but they right there. So who owns the bank? I can't. Who owns the banks? These guys right here, right there. Who owns that? Right? They said from Italy, the law merchant spread to England, and then where it gradually underwent centralization. They said the law merchant. Let me see. It's the present law of sales. So did you bought a car? Okay. Well, who sold you the car? Private international merchants sold you that car. Partnerships, insurance. Okay, who insured your car? Private international merchants. I can't point, but you know where I'm pointing. Right there, right? Bankruptcy is derived from the customs of merchants. They said the law merchant or mercantile law is a body of privately administered rules and customs. Private. All of this is private. Being on TikTok, that we're subject to the rules of private international merchants. The what I'm trying to get to is how does the government, which people tell me every day, the United States is a corporation, corporate. Okay, well, how do they get to abuse this? Because we enter into contracts with them knowingly and unknowingly, and they get through these fake contracts, they get to enforce the rules of Admiralty. Okay, How do our rights get abused? How do people get put in jail and taken to court where there's no injured party? Okay, because we've entered into contracts with foreign merchants who've created a reality around us. Does that make sense? And then I got another law book that says the merchants of the Italian city states took precepts from the ancient law of the Roman Empire. They say it like they don't do it today. Okay, that Roman Empire is still alive today. They said among the merchants of all of Europe, hence this body of business or commercial law, obtained the name law merchant. They say anytime you deal with agencies, sales, negotiable instruments, Federal Reserve, somebody said it, Federal Reserve notes, insurance, carriage, debt, any debt. There was no such thing as debt before. Guarantee, stoppage in transit. You got pulled over? Okay, well, that's called stoppage in transit. Liens, partnerships, and bankruptcy, which is part of banking. Okay, well, all of these topics were made by international traveling private merchants. There you go. They said the word for merchant is literally in the Hebrew. That's where it comes from. All right, does that make sense? All right, so back to the Admiralty stuff. So I said the word arrest, charge, warrant, marshal, bank, all maritime terms. Let's see what else. I read that. I read that. The Supreme Court of Kansas said that a judgment against a defendant in small claims court was a judgment in rem. Okay, well, that's a federal issue. They're not supposed to be doing that in Kansas. I said our food, our clothes, our cars, technology, all industries in this country come from other countries. So by nature, it is all admiralty. Everything comes off a ship, gets on an 18 wheeler, and it ends up in a Walmart. Okay, well, guess what? That's commerce. That's admiralty. Let me see. Let me see. Let me see. A revenue cutter is a ship. All issues of revenue are of admiralty. He said before it was called the Coast Guard, it was called the United States Revenue Cutter Service. And they said, well, hold on, let me read it right. Yeah, he said, yeah, before it was called the Coast Guard, it was called the United States Revenue Cutter Service. And what does the United States Coast Guard do? They do all issues of maritime issues, all maritime enforcement. Y'all heard of these people called the American State Nationals? Well, look up the Coast Guard flag and look up the American State Nationals flag. Those people are the feds. All right. I read that case earlier. Let's see here. Anytime you hear the word shipping, UPS, FedEx, what is that? That's commerce. Every time you get on a plane, that's admiralty. Every time you get on a Greyhound bus or a city bus. Now that don't you understand? I'm just telling you a generalization. There are specifics to everything, and there are rights that are protected in everything. But I'm just giving you a generalization, right? I read this yesterday. I got a book called Commercial Transactions, and they say the development of commercial law. They said these people called the goldsmith bankers have started the use of the check in England. They said in the 1600s they were using checks. They said uh, the first bill of exchange case was in 1603 in England. They said they got records from the year 1272 where they were using negotiable. All that's admiralty. That's all commerce. They said The issue of a bill of exchange was heard in a court of admiralty. They said the law merchant is an international and maritime issue. Let's see. They said, I don't even know where this book is from. I think it's from some encyclopedia. They said commercial law comes from Egypt and Babylon. Okay, well, Google Canaanites influenced Egypt. They're gonna tell you. Actually, I'm gonna read it in just a second. Give me a second. They say Egypt, the most ancient courts. This is under the definition of commercial law. They said the most ancient commercial courts were in Egypt and Babylon. This is from some, I don't even know what encyclopedia is no more. They said the most ancient commercial courts are from Egypt and Babylon. They said they were semi ecclesiastical institutions that used religious rituals in deciding issues. This is admiralty. They say at the end of this this paragraph, see the Roman law. And then they tell you, they say in Anglo-Saxon England, which was before William the Conqueror, they said they mainly had territorial. They didn't have, like, what I'm trying to say is commercial law didn't have all the authority. They said they had to be a specific type of courts, which is that's another topic. All right. Here's another one. I don't even know what book this is from, but the chapter is called The Origin and History of the Admiralty. They say these shrewd Phoenician traders were carriers for Solomon, and they planted trading colonies along the Mediterranean Sea. There you go. Let's see. So if I ask you who created admiralty, who created maritime law, who created commercial law? These Phoenicians right there. They said this stuff goes as far back as the Bible. They said they used to carry stuff for King Solomon back in his day. They said they called them Canaanites at first, or they are the Canaanites. They changed their name to Phoenicians, and then the Phoenicians created trading colonies, which was what? Commercial law as merchants. They said only one group of people do this, and they are called merchants. Uh, what else I got? What else? I read all that. Let's see. Oh, here we go. This is a book from the 1600s on Admiralty. They say, according to this law of fictions is distinguished from real facts, real time, real persons, real place. And then they merge those things with transactions and translocations and transtemperations and transpersonalities. Remember, I told you the definition of persona or a person would be your natural person is your face, something that is real and tangible. Okay, well, a fiction person would be a mask. They say that's where you get the word hypocrite from, because in ancient Rome, when they would hold plays in the middle of these forms, okay, well, have two actors, they would have one actor. One time he would go out and play a different part with his real face, play a bad guy. Okay, well, he would go back out with the mask. Okay, well, this is what they say is happening. It's all one big show. Let's see. So they say this thing called the law of this is from an admiralty book in the 1600s. They say this thing called the law of fictions works with transactions. What is that? That's under the law of commerce. Let's see. They say I don't even know what this is from. It's probably from some dictionary. They say the courts of admiralty enforce the performance of a contract. Oh, here we go. Oh, I forgot I had this. This is some encyclopedia. They said the law merchant was the basis of the modern system of admiralty law. There it is. You can't beat that. And then they say at the end, see commercial law, see maritime law. I need to make a TikTok where I put that on the screenshot. I forgot I had this. Yeah. So what is the law merchant? What is commercial law? Okay, it is the modern system of admiralty law. See, I be forgetting I got stuff. These judges and attorneys will look you dead in your face and call you crazy and call you a sovereign citizen for saying this without proof. What else? Let's see. I don't know where this is from, but I got a screenshot that says the jurisdiction of the courts of maritime contracts exists regardless of where they are executed. So it ain't got to be on water. Look, I mean, I'm talking. They got blogs, they got videos saying all these people are crazy, and they do it every day, dead in our face, and they'll lie, call you crazy, call you soft. Oh, he don't know what he's talking about. They sound stupid. They sound crazy. They sound loco. Okay, they lying straight to our face. I can prove all of it. They said I got a book called Admiralty and Federalism. They said anytime the civil law, meaning presumably the law merchant or maritime law was applicable, Admiralty had exclusive jurisdiction. They said anytime the law merchant was used, Admiralty had exclusive jurisdiction. This is from uh, this is from an American jurisprudence law book. They said the Admiralty Court later widened its jurisdiction to embrace mercantile causes. Okay, well, what's mercantile causes? Commercial law. The Bible says in 2 Peter 2:3, through covetousness they shall with feigned words make merchandise of you. Oh, I got a book on admiralty and maritime laws in the Mediterranean Sea. They say these people called the Phoenicians were among the earliest seafarers to constitute and codify a universal sea law, which most likely formed the basis of subsequent maritime laws. They'll look you dead in your face and say you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. I got this is the Supreme Court of Florida. They said the Supreme Court of Florida said all equity proceedings, all attachment laws, all tax sales, all admiralty cases are contrary to the course of common law. You get the picture? They don't like that common law stuff. They say, oh, we don't do that. Don't talk about that. They'll hold you in contempt. You talk about the common law. You talk about the Constitution. Yeah, they'll hold you in contempt. People tell me all the time, bro. They hold me in contempt. I'm reading Supreme Court cases. Yeah, they don't do that common law stuff. Not there for that. They here to make their bread. They here for that commerce. Uh, they said the admiralty courts work without a jury. The court was to consist of one judge appointed by the crown, whose salary should be paid by those he condemned. And so the judge was motivated to condemn. Every day, baby. They said, we trying to go to Roof Chris for lunch. We're not here for no common law. Don't talk about no common law stuff in here. Oh yeah. I got this It's like a self-taught course on the common law and statutory law. They said, uh, the Revolutionary War had been in part fought to secure the rights to which the common law entitled them. They said many states proceeded to provide the common law of England should be the basis of their law. You understand how important that common law is? That common law said they can't take our stuff without the judgment of a jury. They said, for example, Virginia says the common law of England, so far as it's not repugnant to the Constitution of the state, shall continue in force. Yeah, these judges getting paid. I mean, that's how they make their money. All right, let's see here. I already read that. A warrant is a commercial term. A warrant is a legal writ. So they say they give three definitions. They said a warrant, a dock warrant, is a document certifying that the holder is entitled to collect goods at a maritime dock or warehouse. Okay, what's a warehouse? A warehouse is the jail. They said a warrant of arrest is a legal writ issued by the court, and then they got in parentheses, such as a court of equity, a court of admiralty, gives the authority to detain a vessel to secure a debt or claim. Okay. They say this is under the guise of commercial shipping. We're ships. They think we're property. They don't see us as people. And then they say a warranty. That's where the word warrant comes from. You can find books on warranty on, I don't know. I haven't found any, but I'm sure you can. You can find books on, see if you can search maritime warranties or something like that. And then you'll learn about warrants. State laws don't trump the Constitution. Right. But federal law is not the Constitution. Federal statutes have no authority to be issued inside the states. That's in the Constitution. The same one that says we're guaranteed a republican form of government, which means the states are sovereign. And you can't interpret the United States Constitution without the common law of England. So that's a warrant of arrest is to detain a vessel. A warranty is a contractual term where a charterer guarantees a specific condition. It says a vessel can always safely reach and depart from the place where the cargo operations are conducted. They say, as long as you obey all the rules, okay. That's the warranty. The warranty is the contract. If you breach the contract, then somebody is making a claim through that warrant. Right? Anybody learning anything? Am I just talking to myself? So a warrant is a maritime term governed exclusively by an admiralty court. It's all admiralty since the Civil War. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, they say these Phoenicians changed their name to the Canaanites. They say this is in a book called Chambers Encyclopedia. They got this thing called Chambers Encyclopedia, and they say in the 1200 BC, these Phoenicians changed their name to the Canaanites. And you can just go search the Canaanites by themselves to see if they did maritime and seafaring, things related to the sea. You'll find it. Um, they said these people eventually became bankers. There you go. All bankers. Let me see. Let me see. Ooh, what's a tender? Here we go. Here we go. A tender is a small vessel. What's a legal tender? It's a little ship that they it's Admiralty, baby. Admiralty. It says it's a small vessel in service of government in order to carry orders and intelligence from one place to another. It's a small boat. Currency. You know? Let's see. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. I read this earlier, but I didn't have a bigger screenshot. They say this thing called commercial law comes from Egypt and Babylon. There you go. Well, where'd it go from Babylon? It went to Rome. They say if you want to learn commercial law, see maritime law. It's the same thing. All these three words, same thing. They want you to think, oh, it's something different. In Latin, they call it mercatoria. Mercatora. They said in 1755, the colony of Rhode Island, their courts, they had this thing, they had Admiralty courts in Rhode Island, and they said judgments against merchants were rare. They said the mercantile competitors flouted the law with impunity. That means they didn't obey common law. They did what they wanted to do. And then if they ever got brought in court, okay, well, guess what? They're not going to make judgments against merchants. Why? Because that's who they are. They're all merchants. So of course they're not. The Admiralty courts are always in favor of merchants. It's their courts. All right, let's see what else. All right, the United States Supreme Court said maritime law is federal. They said maritime jurisprudence is a part of the law of nations. Oh, I did this the other day. What is a school? I know what a school is. See, they our language. We don't even use the same language no more. We think we're using terms that we're using somebody else's language. What is a school? A school is a maritime term. It is a vessel or ship for merchant training. They said the word school comes from a fish. The word school is derived from the word shoals. Then I guess they somehow added, I guess maybe they didn't use the word school. They didn't use a K in it. Said schools. And then over time it became schools. But that verbiage is the same. School is a ship. Or they say while commonly known as a for fish groups, it is referred to floating academies for seamanship. It is deeply connected to nautical life and education. A school is a vessel or ship merchant training. Sometimes I just Google if a word is a maritime term, and then they'll tell you the origin. Sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes I'm wrong, but that word school is a merchant word. It's a commercial term. It's a maritime. Because all of this stuff are ancient principles of the sea. You understand? There's only one group of people who develop these rules. So what happens when we? I don't have no kids, but what happens when kids go to school? Okay, well, what happens when we went to school? I'm not. Well, they're not special, right? There were no schools when this country started, y'all. There were some universities that carried over from England, but as far as American schools, under the authority of the federal or state constitution, there's no such thing as a school. There's no such thing as a law school or a law program. They only had one, the College of William and Mary, and it was like in a crappy house. Mhm. What's an arrest? That's an maritime term. We be using these words every day. We don't have no clue what they mean. Me too. I'm not special. I'm not better than nobody. I'm just saying, like, they got us. They got us. They got us good, boy. I said, I think school is a maritime term. 'Cause I was thinking too, like, yeah, a school of fish. Okay, well, a school is a group of fish. There's no such thing as a school of fish. A fish group is a school. It's all related to the They said the word refers to a floating academy. Yep. The Bible calls all of this witchcraft. Well, Black's Law is the name of a guy. His name is Henry Campbell Black. So Black's Law Dictionary is the name of is the last name of the guy. All these old dictionaries are the last name of somebody. Black's Law Dictionary is his name is Henry Campbell Black. He's a real guy. He was an American. But yeah, a school is a maritime term, and it is for merchant training. It is a vessel for merchant training. Watch this. All right, so I got other stuff. Let's see here. This is another maritime book from the 1600s. All right, so I had to use Google Translate. It wasn't in English, but once I used Google Translate, it said, as far as Admiralty, they said this kind of naval society is ancient. It was not invented yesterday or today for the first time. They're talking about the 1600s. They said, indeed, already in his age, Solomon, king of the Hebrews, entered into a certain class of society with Hiram, king of the Tyrans, and the Greek word, yeah, I can't read that. I don't read Greek, is an indication that it was already used among the Greeks, not only by them, but also by the Romans, to which we have a great witness. So they said, okay, when you study Hiram, king of the Tyrants, okay, well, you study Tyre and Sidon in the Bible. Okay, well, these Phoenicians, these Canaanites, that was them. That was all them. Same group of people. They went nowhere. They changed names. Same group of people. Because I remember I read you another little book that said they were carriers. What that mean? They made contracts for ships to carry things for Solomon, to go to and fro, to bring things in from different nations. Okay, well, that was them. How did Solomon get 300 concubines and all these type of okay, well, he made false contracts with all these different nations. Let's see. There was another, right? We got school. There's some other definitions. Hold on. A passport. Okay, well, what's a passport? Passport has strong maritime roots, originating for the need from the need for documents to pass through sea harbors or city gates, evolving into ship-specific Mediterranean pass to protect vessels from pirates. Okay, well, they said it came from the Mediterranean. Well, there's only one group of people who was dominating that time. So who created passports? Let's see. An arrest, here we go. An arrest is a maritime term, is a prominent legal term in maritime law. They said it refers to a specific civil law procedure where a ship is physically seized and detained by judicial authorities, but typically in a port to secure a maritime claim. Okay, well, we use that word every day. Every time we say somebody got arrested, we're using a metaphysical term. The Bible calls all of this stuff witchcraft. Amish people, they say all this stuff is witchcraft. They said this process is a powerful legal remedy allowing creditors and other claimants to ensure that a ship remains within the court's jurisdiction. Ain't this crazy? We use these words every day. We have no clue what that means, and they don't want us to know what it means. let's see, let's see. I already read that. There's some other ones. Let me see if I can. A seizure, to seize something, that's a maritime word. Oh, here we go. I was gonna say it earlier. Okay, I Googled earlier. They said the Canaanites didn't just excel in Egypt, they significantly influenced it. They said notably, I can't pronounce their name. Excuse me. They said they brought innovations. That's the word I was looking for. Innovations. That's the word. Instead of efficiently and sufficiently, innovations. Yeah, there we go. They said they brought innovations like horse-drawn chariots. Okay, well, all this stuff is in the book of Genesis, the book of Exodus, the book of Deuteronomy, all of this stuff. Technologies. They said the Canaanites absorbed the Egyptian art and practices and established economic ties. There we go. See, they would just establish contracts. They would simplify a process and then make a contract for you to use it, baby. What do you mean? Can you elaborate a bit more with the ties of Admiralty and witchcraft? Yeah. I read this yesterday, and I have this video. I do have it on there. All these live streams are on YouTube right now. This live stream, I'm live streaming on YouTube and on TikTok right now. So, uh, so the live stream yesterday, I go into this. I go over commerce and the Constitution and the origin. Okay, so Admiralty, maritime, commercial law all comes from these guys called uh, Phoenicians, right? So I got a screenshot from a book that says the Phoenicians gave us our alphabet. Okay, well, let me find out this other thing I was going to read. I read it earlier. Nah, I can't find it. Dang it. Ah, there you go. All right, so they say these Phoenicians who created Admiralty, commercial, law, say Phoenicians necessitated the establishment of a system of commercial law. They said these Phoenicians often referred to as merchants. This is from some law professor in the Middle East. He says these Phoenicians were referred to, it's the same name, Constitution Academy. Uh, these Phoenicians, referred to as merchants, had a remarkable approach to maritime trade, which went beyond mere commercial transactions. They said their success rested on a dual strategy aimed at enchanting other populations into purchasing their merchandise. They said these Phoenicians developed phonetics, the language we're speaking today. They created that language. They said this phonetics was designed for universal understanding. They said the Phoenicians are credited with the invention of phonetic spelling known as Phoenician spelling. They said they also pioneered the creation of letter symbols corresponding with individual sounds. That's the alphabet. All right. They said complementing this linguistic prowess, the Phoenicians employed incantations or formulae to orchestrate, invigorate, and promote the trading activities. They use witchcraft. You know what merchant means? Word mer means sea. The word chant means incantation or enchantment. How did they do it? They created our language. You, even if you speak Spanish, even I mean, no matter what you speak today, it is. Remember in the Bible that God destroyed the Tower of Babel because they were all speaking the same language? They weren't all speaking the same language. Somebody created a language or a letter system that all these languages could interpret, right? So you go to Google Translate, okay, well, that would be even in Spanish, that Spanish is phonetics. They may not say it the same, but it's all the same symbols. Even if you speak Chinese today, okay, well, technically, it don't matter what you speak to these people, as long as you're doing the same merchant practices, that would be the same. They said they created all of these symbols. So if you speak Spanish, English, all of so ancient Spanish wouldn't be the current Spanish they speak today, right? You meet people from Mexico, they talk about these people called the Aztecs, but they say they didn't speak the same. That ain't the same Spanish they speak today. They say a lot of our English words are from the Romance languages. Yeah, well, those Romance languages go all the way back to Phoenicia. They say you study English history. These people called the Anglo-Saxons, where we get our common law from, they said they spoke a different type of English that we speak today. They didn't have no alphabet, but they said when William the Conqueror came in 1066, well, he was French. His Norman language was from France. Okay, well, who controlled French? The Roman Empire. They said in 1066, William the Conqueror took over England. He changed the language of the courts. And guess what they use in courts today? Latin. Okay, all that's derived from phonetics. They changed our language. So all the words, they say they used to put hidden meanings in our words. That's why we have to have our dictionaries today to even know the beginning of these things. Because the language we use today, they got hidden meanings in those terms. What was another thing I was gonna say? Okay, these Phoenicians, okay, they worship. You look it up in the Bible. They worship a guy called a guy. They worship a false god called Baal. Baal. Well, Baal is it's not real. It's an idol. It's a false idol, right? Well, they say they use it's really Satan, right? Whatever Satan is, right? That's probably a word we don't know what it means. But okay, well, these Phoenicians and these Canaanites explicitly worship Baal, and Baal is a false god. You look at Baal, okay, well, Prophet Elijah had to execute all of these Baal prophets. You look it up. This Bible's nasty, y'all. Y'all got to get in the Bible. They said these people who were worshiping Baal, the prophets of Baal, the priest of Baal, they wore black robes. Well, who do we know wearing black robes today? They said in their day they would make sacrifices, and the incense and the smoke of their sacrifices would turn their robes black. Okay, well, guess who wear black robes today? The guys we complain about every day, called magistrates. Okay, magistrates are of the ecclesiastical order. I've read it all night. This is all ecclesiastical Roman law. Well, who do we know doing chants and wearing robes and enforcing all of this stuff? I can't point because the camera's backwards. But these guys right here, the Roman Catholic Church, we understand that. This is where all that's the face of it. That's not who it is, right? We think it's the Pope. The Pope is just doing what he's told. They have a Pope every other year, right? It's always a new Pope, but the system is always the same. How can we be sure that this witchcraft is not in the Bible? Because you would have to read the Bible to know that there's a difference. You study these Canaanites, these people were totally disobedient to God. God had them killed multiple times throughout the Bible. You would have to read the Bible. Yeah, you're gonna say, "Oh, well, these people were Jewish, so that means that all Jew" No, it's not what that means. There were the people of God, and then there were not the people of God, alright? I told you, go look up Tyre and Sidon. These are these people. These people are not of these people, although they may be Jewish. whatever that means, or although they may be Hebrews, they were not the people of God. These were not the people that obeyed God's word or obeyed God's law. There is a difference. Just because something's in the Bible don't mean all of it's witchcraft. And people tell me all the time, "Oh, well, equity's in the Bible." Okay, well, yeah, but you don't understand the context of the Bible. So equity's not a good thing. And just because it's in the Bible don't mean that means you don't know the Bible, right? Let me tell you the context. Okay. In the Constitution, they got this thing called the Republican form of government. Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. I got it right here in my face. All right. It says that the United States, the federal government, shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion. Right. Okay. Well, what's a Republican form of government? I told you they changed our language, right? Today, we think a Republican government is, oh, Donald Trump. That's what it means to be a Republican form of government. Well, that context is not federal. To be a Republican is not a federal ideology. You couldn't vote Republican or Democrat. There's no such thing as a Democrat in the Constitution. There's no such thing as the opposite of a Democrat in the Constitution. What is a Republican form of government? They got a definition for it. The definition of a Republican government or a Republican form of government is one in which the sovereignty is in the people. It's vested in the people. Okay, well, where did they get that from? Well, you have to study what a Republican form of government is in the context of English laws. They said you cannot understand the Constitution without going to the common law of England. Okay, well, what happened in the common law of England? Common law of England, the real common law is the unwritten laws of England. Okay, well, they say these people called the Anglos and the Saxons were the real establishers of the common law. This is before William the Conqueror. Trial by jury, all this stuff they touted, they fought over came from them. Okay, well, right before they broke off from Great Britain in 1776, okay, well, they were studying what a Republican form of government is because they had been under a monarchy their entire English existence. So they said when before they got ready to break off from England, all the preachers of the day researched the first Commonwealth. And you know what they came to the conclusion of? This is all in the Bible. For the first 10 books of the Bible, first 10 books from Genesis to First Samuel. Okay, count it. Double check me. From the book of Genesis to First Samuel, they did not have a secular government. They didn't have a government. For the first 10 books of the Bible. That's a long time period. They did not have a government. The people of God, the people who obey God's laws, not in perfection, but to the best of their ability to obey God's law, did not have a government over them. See, we don't understand the context of the Bible. The Old Testament is telling a story of a family, right? So from the book of Genesis to, I mean, the entire story is about disobedience to God. That's what the whole Bible's about, right? All right. Well, from Genesis to First Samuel, they didn't have a they didn't have a government. And they said when they got ready to break off from England because they didn't know what life without a government would be. They didn't know what a republican form of government is. They had to go to the first 10 books of the Bible. And they said they studied the life of the people under Moses because Moses was the family. They said they studied Joshua, who was next up. Okay, well, Moses was the leader of the family. That's not government. That's not a secular government. Okay, well, and then they studied the book of Judges, books where they talk about the judges. Well, the judges in the first 10 books of the Bible, they're all related. So this is a story of one large family. and they said, "Okay, well, we have to study these major time periods from Genesis to understand what a republican form of government is." They said it's where the sovereignty was with the people under God's law, not under. You get to the book of Samuel, okay, well, the book of Samuel communicates that they got a king. They didn't have a king. They got a king out of disobedience. They said that was a curse to be under a king. They said, "Give us a king to judge us like all the nations." Okay, so God gave that to them out of disobedience. And so you got Saul, and you know what he did? He was a horrible king, horrible king. You study, this is the Bible. Study the kings from, I think it was what, Saul, David, Solomon, all these guys, horrible, horrible, because they wanted a judge, they wanted a government like all the nations did. Okay, well, you don't obey God's laws, you don't obey God's voice. Okay, the consequence. You get under a curse. So they got judged. They got people to judge them like all the rest of the nations. Okay, well, they're no longer under a republican form of government after that. That's why in the United States Constitution they say that continue. Why? Because the original 13 states said, "We want this common law of England. We're going to have a republican form of government. The people be sovereign." Okay, so you get to Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. They say, uh, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republic." Well, what is a republican form of government? That doesn't mean you vote for president. That's not what that means. It means the people are sovereign. It means the states are sovereign. And you would have to go to English history to know that. So that's why this trial by jury thing is significant. Why? Because the jury are the judges. Who's the authority? Who's supposed to be the authority? The people. Okay, well, these Phoenicians, you study the history of Canaan. I talked about this. Okay, well, you got Noah, Ham, and Canaan. Well, Canaan was placed under a curse because of Ham's perversion. Okay, as a result, Noah said that Canaan is under a curse because of his dad's perversion. Okay, so what does Canaan, what do Canaan do? The Bible says that from one man he creates an entire nation. Okay, well, he created an entire nation of curses. And what do? They spread curses. They spread it to Egypt. They spread it to Babylon. Now they're in Rome. Spread death, spread curses. What does the sea mean? In the Bible, it means death. Anything that had to do with water on a major level is signifying God's judgment. What happened in Moses' day? Okay, well, Moses or God had to drown the Egyptians in the sea, right? How did he do it? He used the sea to do it. And that was considered God's judgment. That water would bring about death. Okay, well, what happened in Babylon? Oh, well, not in Babylon. We're talking about the Bible. So what happened with Noah and the flood? I guess Noah happened before Moses. So what happened with Noah? Noah would be first. Okay, well, he drowned the entire planet for disobedience, and he did that as an act of judgment. So what is water? What does the sea represent? Represents death. You got Noah, where God judged the entire planet with water. Moses, he judges God's enemies with water, drowns them in the sea, uses the sea as a picture of death. You got Jonah. Jonah says they tossed him into the sea. He was there for 3 days. He said he was in Sheol. What is Sheol? That word Sheol means death. What does the Bible say? The Bible says, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man." Okay, well, if we're surrounded by the sea, it's judging people falsely. Okay, well, as it was in the days of Noah, So shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. Happened with Moses, okay, they used the sea to drown people. That sea brought death, that water brought death. What happened with Jonah? That water brought death. 3 days. You know what Jesus says in the New Testament? He says, "Some of you seek after a sign, but no sign shall be given you but the prophet Jonah, but that of the prophet Jonah." This is nasty stuff. You know, Jesus calls his crucifixion a baptism. What is baptism? Okay, a symbolism of being buried. It's a symbol of water and death. Before he died, he had already been baptized by John. He says, "You guys are ready to be baptized with the baptism that I'm about to be baptized with." He was talking about his death. He was talking about his crucifixion. Why? Because water or the sea represents death. Where did John the Baptist baptize people? He baptized them in water, baptized them in the river, which led to the seas. What does the sea represent? What are these merchants? What is the myrrh? The sea, incantations of death. They speak death. We're speaking the language of death. That's why the Bible, man, these preachers don't be talking about this stuff yet. That's why they don't talk about 13 people, because this stuff is for real. This stuff ain't no play. Oh, it's cool. You Admiralty. People talk about it like it's positive. People talk about equity. People talk about negotiations. They're all feds. They're all scammers. They're all lying. They're all speaking. Look, the Bible talks about merchants. They've never talked about merchants. I've got to say this. The Apostle Paul called Moses, the story of the Red Sea drowning the Egyptians. He called that a baptism. It's a symbolism of death. They say when we get baptized, it's a symbolism of being buried with Christ and being raised up. So there's God's view of water, which is supposed to bring life, and then there's the enemy's viewpoint of water, which actually brings death and destruction. I got these Bible verses. Let me see. So all this language of commercialism, let me see. All of this is death. That's what the word "myrrh" means. The word "myrrh" means death, and it means death. When you study the Bible, every time they talk about water, why did Jesus walk? So that he could defeat it. So that we could defeat it. Peter get to walk on water because he's a representation of the church, and the church is supposed to be able to defeat this stuff. I'm like, dang, I didn't know you was talking about this stuff. Yeah, this stuff deep. You don't get to have a lot of friends that have this stuff. You don't get to be famous on TikTok, YouTube, and talk about this stuff. Real deal. Nobody I know in real life listens to me talk about this stuff. I I'm not a weirdo, I'm not some weird guy, but every time I try to engage in this stuff, people act like, "Oh, yeah, can't handle it." Let me see, Revelation 18. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. You know what that word fornication means? It means intercourse. It's the same definition of the word commerce. We're in so much trouble. They said, "For the all the nations have drunk the wine of her wrath, have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her." With who? System of merchants. And all the merchants of the earth become rich. Abundance of luxury. What luxury? Luxury of the system of commerce. The law calls commerce intercourse. The Bible calls intercourse harlotry. Yeah, they said the word myrrh means sea. The word chant means enchantment. It's a sea enchantment. They said this word myrrh, like mermaid, merman, merfolk, is derived from both English and French, both which mean sea. So what's a mercenary? Okay, well that's somebody who gets paid to bring forth death. It's commerce. They don't kill people for free. They said we gotta wait till the deposit come in. What's that movie? Suicide Squad with Will Smith? He said, "Oh, I can't kill the guy until I see till I till I get the cash out notification." He said, "Oh, okay, alright, I'll snipe him now, right? Okay, well that's all it's all the same." They said this merchant would literally translate to enchanting, sometimes dangerous melodies. They said these songs in what they would call the medieval world would be used to lure sailors to the water or to their doom, adding the enchantment aspect to it. So they lure people to the water, to the waters of commerce, or they say, or to their doom. They said this is what they do. The word lure is a maritime term. All these things we using don't apply. It's all we use their language every single day. So what's a merchant? A merchant is somebody who uses incantations of the sea. And what does sea mean? Sea represents death. Water represents death. So you'll watch a guy like what's his name? Jordan Maxwell, and he'll tell you half of the truth. Why? Because he's a Fed. Or he's dead now. But they'll give you a little poison. They'll give you the poison with some Kool-Aid. So they'll tell you a little truth. There was a guy named Bill Cooper back in the day. He's dead now too. He said whenever people are getting ready to find out the truth, well, they'll go ahead and tell you. They just won't tell you all of it. He said when people were about to discover they were finding aliens everywhere, UFOs, which we know just to be demons and angels. Okay, well, they said they made new. They said they put it on the news. Oh yeah, I think they found some UFOs, flying saucers. Yeah, they give you a little poison. They won't tell you the whole truth, right? People, I mean, I'm seeing. I don't go looking for this stuff, but they say, okay, well, in Antarctica, they say you. They say it's more land past Antarctica. They say that's it. You can't go no further. They say it's something way out there past Antarctica, which I'm not. I don't care. But I was supposed to be reading some other verses. Yeah, here you go. They say Revelation 18:23. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by their sorcery all the nations are deceived. Let's see. I know I got some more. Here we go. Matthew 21:12. Yeshua entered the temple grounds and drove out those who were doing business there, both the merchants and their customers. And he upset the desk of money changers. Well, that word temple, they didn't go to church, even in the Old Testament. That was the courts. The word temple is the word courts. The same thing we're dealing with today, Jesus dealt with in our day. So they didn't go to the temple to do worship. They went to the courts. Because he says it. He says, woe to you lawyers. You load men down with burdens and do not lift one finger to help them. How many attorneys don't help us? Hold on. Not one attorney will tell you this stuff. They don't help you unless you give them thousands of dollars, right? Okay, well, guess who those people are? Many people. Who did Jesus kick out of the temple, which was really the courts? Attorneys. He said Jesus went into the temple. This is another translation. Jesus went into the temple and drove out the merchants, knocked over the money changers' tables. That's why they said that we're supposed to have a trial by jury. Why? Because anybody who's doing judgments in temples with religious ceremony and tribunals of the ecclesiastical order were merchants. Merchant don't mean you participating in something financial. They say any activity with foreign nations was considered commerce because commerce, at its definition, is intercourse. He said Jesus went to the temple and threw out everyone who had set up shop, buying and selling. He kicked over the tables. Yep, there we go. Visibility is restricted because my live does not comply with for you eligibility. There you go. Misinformation that may cause or moderate harm. Yep, there you go. Just like that, boys. Tell the truth. Serious. I had to click the button to get it out the screen. Tell the truth causes harm. You start asking questions, it causes harm. They don't like harm. Yep. That's how I know I'm telling the truth. They do that all the time. They don't show my stuff to nobody. Y'all got 30,000 on TikTok. You don't show up for 13 people. I might be telling the truth. Sometimes I don't know I'm telling the truth until I see stuff like that. I say, oh, I might know some stuff. Sometimes I don't. I question myself. I'm like, man, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm correct. Nope. I see stuff like that. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, I'm on the right path. So don't be discouraged. Don't be, you know what I mean? It happens. I'll start another page one day. Oh yeah, all this AI stuff. All right, let's see. Yeah, you start reading Bible verses. They don't like that. Let me see if I can find another. Uh, let's see. Oh yeah, I read that one. That was Jesus in the temple. I do. I'm on Patreon. It's $5. $5 a month. And then I have a YouTube channel. I'm also on YouTube right now, but they say they freeze my YouTube stuff. So I don't know. But I do have a website. It's Constitution Academy. I have my books on there. Oops, I have my books on there. Uh I got three books on there. I got the Sermon of the Vigil. This is my book on the courts. Constitution Academy. Constitution Academy. I got everything I read to y'all tonight is on Constitution. Well, not everything. Stuff that if it came from the courts, it's on Constitution Academy on Patreon. It's the same name for everything for YouTube, for TikTok, for Patreon. You'll see a black guy with no hairline. That's me. And then I got a biblical view of commercial law. That's you want to learn some stuff. You'll learn it through there. You'll learn the history of England. You'll learn all that stuff. This is about 300 pages. This is almost 300 pages. I read this book every day, and it's fine. I read it every day. That's why it's so beat up. I take it on every plane I go to, get on or whatever. But that's at constitutionacademy.org. If you want a physical, it takes about 2 weeks to get to you. Take a week to print and a week to ship. So, what else? I was gonna find another. Oh yeah, I found it. I found it. Well, I lost it. I had it, but I lost it. Okay, here we go. Hosea 12:1. They say this guy in the Bible named Ephraim is an evil spirit. So you know what else is hilarious? They'll let these scammers talk about whatever. I see people straight lying. They got hundreds of people watching their stuff all day. I'm like, how they have time to do all that? I got to read books all day. I have to quit jobs and read books and compile this information. And they just be lying all day, get plenty of views. Don't ever get strikes, none of that stuff. But Hosea 12:1 says that this guy named Ephraim is an evil spirit. And Hosea 12:7, it says that this guy named Ephraim is a merchant and he uses dishonest scales and loves to defraud. Another translation says that this guy named Ephraim is a cunning Canaanite. Deceitful scales are in his hands and he loves to oppress. Let's say another one. This guy named Ephraim is a Canaanite and that he's a merchant and that the balances of deceit are in his hands and he loves to oppress. The next translation says that this guy named Ephraim is a trafficker. The balances of deceit are in his hands and he loves to oppress. You look at the definition of the word merchant. Okay, well, you got traffic, intercourse. I think that's what's flagging my stuff. I'm probably not supposed to be saying that word. Uh, but yeah, all those words are under the definition of commerce. All of those are under the definition of commerce. Second Peter 2:3 says, through covetousness they shall with feigned words make merchandise of you. The Apostle Peter, he know. The word myrrh means sea. What do all that mean? All that means we're supposed to be going off grid. That's what it means. We're supposed to be going off grid. Let's see. Yep, here we go. This is another book. It says the book of Job, the word Canaanite. There you go. So who's in charge of all this stuff? Who's secretly behind the scenes? These Phoenicians, these Canaanites. Oh, you get flagged all the time. I think I'm on my last strike on uploading videos too. If I get one more strike, because I don't know. I think one time I showed what happens on the passport. It say do not detain. I actually got that. That's on the Patreon, and I made a video about it. They they flagged that thing. I said, "Oh, I must be telling the truth." Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I need a little encouragement, and they'll flag the page. So yeah, y'all ready to move to the same city? Trouble. Yeah, the word. Oh yeah, Babylon, 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 Babylon. That part's that. There we go. The word synonym for incantation is enchantment, charm, magic, bewitch, chant. They said that word means secrecy and covertly. That's what the occult is. Let me see. I'm trying to find that other. Oh yeah, Mercury. Somebody said this. I think somebody said Mercury. Mercury means trading. So Mercury is a fake Roman god, right? They said this guy called Mercury is a Roman deity, the god of eloquence, skills, trading, thieving, trading and thieving, presider over the roads, conductor, departed souls to the lower world. I'm trying to find this verse in Revelation. I think it's Revelation. Babylon, Revelation, Babylon the Great. Yeah, Revelation 18. That's not what I'm looking for. Well, maybe it is. I don't remember now, but I can't find it. But 17:5. There we go. There we go. Yada yada yada. Probably flag it for real. Uh, look, here we go. Here's some Admiralty for you. Oh, they freezing it. They freezing it. Revelation. I'll show you the punishment of the great who's there you go. With her, the kings of the earth committed were intoxicated with the wine of her. Yeah, Revelation 17. That's all about Admiralty. What somebody say? What my passport say when well, it said, well, this is important. When you don't have a license or a state ID, you don't have a car, passport will say do not detain. If you have a car on their system in their computer or your state ID is on their computer, okay, well, they're going to ignore that do not detain stuff on the passport, right? So if you don't have a state ID and you don't have a car, that's all it will show when they run the passport, and that is evidence that they don't have the ability to create a case. There's no entry. So people think, oh, well, I was driving a car, but I didn't have a license. No, that's how that works. But it says do not arrest, do not detain. I got it on here. You go to passports. I think it's on the passport section of the Patreon. Passports, passports. Oh yeah, they got Supreme Court. I got Supreme Court cases about it. These are old cases. Now they speak in analogy, right? They said a ship shall have a passport to show that she belongs to a state. If she is furnished with these documents, she is to be exempted from all detention or arrest. Some words I guess I can't say, but they said yada yada yada. They said when the vessels have the required document, excuse me, it says it is forbidden to detain the vessels required with the required documents. Free ships should make free goods without providing any real evidence. But okay, they said at the end of the sentence, they say if the passport in due form, the belligerent cannot detain the vessel after this document is exhibited. What is Patreon? And Patreon is an app and a website. It's a way for you to support creators. Mine is called Constitution Academy. It's $5 a month, and I put anything related to law. Some stuff I don't put on there because it ain't court. But I try to put everything that I think you can use in court in there, or just so you can learn the law. I post some. I got over 1,000 pieces of information. I find stuff for a specific state, I'll add it and I'll tag a state. So I got different. They call them collections. So if you go to the passport collection, you're gonna see a bunch of stuff, a bunch of cases, a bunch of books, information, and I cite where I get everything from. If it's from a case, I'll tell you the case, where the case is at. If it's from a law book and I got the book, then I upload the book. I got over 24 law dictionaries on there. I mean, I got add some more stuff for Colorado. Okay, I'll look up stuff for Colorado. Um, but yeah, as I find stuff, I'll just add it to a case. Sometimes I go down rabbit holes and then you'll see a bunch of stuff about, a specific topic if I find a bunch of stuff, but if not, as I study, as I find stuff at it. So mainly from state Supreme Court cases, because I'm learning the state Supreme Courts is who has all the information. So here's another one. It says, yeah, so they say if the passport be in due form, the belligerent cannot detain the vessel. What's the last part? That is the last part. Oh, it say more than that. It's got a whole sentence for those people when that stuff pulls up on the computer. I have the whole document of where that stuff comes from. I'm not gonna find I can't find it or read it that fast, but it's in the passport section, I think. Let me see. Yeah, they got a whole book on it. Yep, here we go. Like a whole it's a whole book on it. Maybe I'll try to talk about it. Yeah, it say, "Do not detain or arrest this individual based on this notice." They got a bunch of types of that information, so there's a specific one that shows when you're not actually committing a crime and there's no injured party. Yeah, they say, I can't read some of this stuff because 'cause they'll definitely flag it, but it says a lot of stuff on there. It's like a whole page. But they say the last sentence, it says, "Contact the threat," what's it called? The threat I forgot the acronym, but it essentially says, like, "Contact the Threat Assessment Center to obtain such information." But yeah here we go. Yep, there they go, flagging it again. So, yeah, alright, it's 10:30, I'm finna get off of here. As long as they'll let me, I'll be on here tomorrow at 6:30. Um, if not, I'll be on YouTube tomorrow at 6:30. So, alright, I'm out.